Hello everyone, welcome to What If Quirkless Deku became the #1 scientific hero Part 3. Before we start, please go support FailedDragon for writing that awesome fanfic. Chapter 33. He wasn't ready. The second Izuku opened the door, Inko was there. She quickly offered Shinso some guest slippers, took his coat, and asked him if the apartment was too chilly for him. Izuku watched, an embarrassed blush on his face as his mother smothered his new friend with hospitality. Shinso looked like a deer caught in headlights as she escorted him over to the couch. "Here's the remote, sweetie. Watch anything you like. Izuku and I aren't picky," Inko said as she gave Shinso the remote. "But don't put on any pre-Quirk horror films. Izuku may like them, but they give me the heebie-jeebies." The lost look on Shinso's face made Izuku giggle as he joined him on the couch. Inko left to finish cooking as the two sat in the living room. Shinso turned on the TV and left it. "Your mom is really nice," Shinso commented, looking over to Izuku. Izuku left out a small laugh, nodding. "Yeah, I guess she just really likes it when I have friends over," Izuku replied. The show on TV seemed like a random comedy, but neither boys really paid attention to it. "Do you have friends over often?" Shinso asked. "No, not really," Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. At least, not in my school. The Bakugos come over every so often, but other than that I never had friends over." "Oh," Shinso said, an odd look on his face. "Me neither. But I don't think if I even had friends, that they would be willing to come to my house." Izuku looked over to Shinso, a bit of understanding on his face. "I get that. When I was first diagnosed as quirkless, kids used to think I was contagious and avoid me as much as possible," Izuku said, a sad smile on his face. "I guess kids would have had a similar assumption that you would brainwash them." "Yeah, they did," Shinso replied. The more they talked, the more the two realized the other understood them. They probably understood each other better than anyone else at school. "Supper's ready," Inko called excitedly. She stood in front of the island and the two boys walked over to see everything set up. "You go first, Shinso," Izuku said, shoving the boy lightly. "You are the guest." "I guess," Shinso said as he hesitantly picked up a plate with a bun on it. He chose to put cheese, onion, lettuce, ketchup and of course, pickles on his burger. Izuku did the same but added mustard and Inko added a slice of tomato for hers. For sides, Inko made homemade French fries. "You two are quiet, I suppose I did good then?" Inko asked with a bright smile as she watched the two boys eat. "Yemchomdib," and "Mramli gwmd," were the replies she received. Inko just nodded, supposing it must be good since both boys went back in to take a huge bite out of the burgers. Izuku and Shinso both went back for seconds. Inko waited patiently as they ate, not wanting to start a conversation and make her guests feel rushed. Once the two were finished, she quickly took over dish duty and asked Izuku to put the leftovers in containers. "So, Shinso, Izuku told me you're trying to get into the hero course?" Inko asked kindly. She saw the cautiousness in Shinso's posture, and frowned. "I don't want him to be scared of me," she thought. "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, you don't have to call me that. Inko is just fine, hun," Inko said with a bright smile on her face. "It must be very exciting to be doing all that training. What kind of hero do you want to be?" An underground hero probably," Shinso replied, looking over to Izuku. "I don't really have a flashy quirk, so." "Underground heroes are truly remarkable," Inko noted, avoiding the topic of his quirk. The last thing she wanted to do was scare the boy away by going into a touchy subject. "Izuku has rambled on and on to me about how unappreciated they are considering how much they do." This seemed to bring a tinge of excitement in Shinso's expression. "Yeah, most of them fight quirkless sometimes too," Shinso added. Inko smiled brightly. "Oh, I know. Izuku never got over it when he found a video of one underground hero with a quirk that erases quirks," Inko said before turning to Izuku. "What was his name again, sweetie? The one you were obsessed with and wrote a lot about in your journal? The one with the scarf?" Shinso immediately perked up, looking over at Izuku. You're a fan of Eraserhead too? Shinso asked, betrayed. How come I'm the only one stumbling and making a fool of myself then? Sorry, Izuku said, a little bit embarrassed. If it makes you feel better, I yelled at him that he was one of my favorite heroes when he was in a hospital bed? Shinso's face went blank before amusement and confusion crossed over. You what? Shinso asked before bursting out laughing. Izuku laughed too as Inko smiled and finished putting everything away, shooing the boys to the living room. Yeah, it was kind of embarrassing after I realized what I had done, Izuku said as the two sat down. Inko watched amusedly as the two boys talked about why Eraserhead was one of their favorites, and how cool it was that he was training them. Eventually Inko brought over some mochi for the two to nibble on as they talked about some of their other teachers. Inko joined in here and there, asking about their class work, who teaches what, whether lunches lived up to the praise. When Shinso got a message from his uncle saying he was parked outside, they finally ceased their conversation. Izuku and Inko walked him to the door, helping him gather his bag and the homework Izuku helped him finish. How about we make this a weekly thing? Inko asked the boy as he got up from tying his shoes. I'm sure Izuku agrees that we'd love to have you over again. We can do it once a week. You just let us know what day works, okay? Yes, ma Inko. Shinso fixed his mistake, a light blush on his face as he left to go downstairs. He's nice, I like him, Inko commented after the boy left. Izuku gave her a look that said really before he plopped down on the couch. I like him too, Izuku said as he dove into whatever he was working on in his notebook. Inko was used to this and left Izuku to do whatever he was doing in peace. Izuku opened up his notebook to the page where he had Aizawa write down the information of his capture weapon designer. Shoyo Genji, Team Ida 10 Agency, XXXXXXX was scribbled down on the page in neat writing. Izuku couldn't help but appreciate Aizawa's neat, but, as Kirishima would say, manly handwriting. Pulling out his phone, Izuku typed in the number. There were a few rings before a masculine voice answered. Shoyo Genji. Hello sir. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Shota Aizawa gave me your information. Do you have a couple minutes to talk? Izuku cursed himself for stuttering, even though he did a lot better than he thought he would. Shota gave you my information? Well, this must be good. How can I help you, Midoriya? Well, I'm in the support course at UA and I have a fellow student who really admires Eraserhead. They also have a mental quirk. So I was wondering if you could help me make another capture weapon. You mean I'd get to work with a UA student? Heck yeah, kid! I'd love to. Really? Thank you so much. I hope you don't mind, but I also have a few suggestions for improvements. Not that it isn't good already. It's amazing actually. There's some advanced technology that has come up in the past few years that I think could help. I'd love to hear what you have in mind. How about I make a few calls and see if I can meet up with you at UA? I used to be a prize student there myself, so I don't think there should be any issues. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, sir. No problem, kid. I'm gonna save your number and I'll text you if I can get something planned. Or I can just ask Shota to tell you. Actually, can you keep this a secret from him? I want it to be a surprise. Kid, you just made this a whole lot better. I will text you then. Talk to you later, kid. Yes, sir. Thank you. Izuku hung up, a feeling of accomplishment in his chest as he put down his phone and continued to go through his notes. Unfortunately, he never got to speak to Shinso about his quirk tonight, but he's sure he will eventually. Probably when the boy is a little more comfortable with it. What are you up to? Inko asked as she leaned on the doorframe to her room. Izuku blushed lightly. He thought she was still in her room preparing for bed. A surprise for Shinso and Aizawa. Is it a good surprise? A very good surprise. Inko smiled brightly. Carry on then. Chapter 34. Midoriya. Izuku was just entering the lab when his name was called. Izuku turned to see it was Mr. Higuri who had called him. Yes, sir? Izuku asked as he approached the teacher's lab bench. Nezu would like for you to go and see him. Since you are so ahead of the class, he has deemed it appropriate to steal you from me. The tone in his teacher's voice told Izuku that he did not like losing his student to the principal. I thought our weekly meeting is supposed to be tomorrow? Izuku asked. He had just gotten back from his appointment with Hound Dog and was excited to finish planning his latest surprise project. Unfortunately, Nezu has a board meeting tomorrow, so he asked, no, demanded that I send you to him today. Mr. Higuri sighed before handing Izuku a hall pass. He didn't really need it since the whole staff of UA has gotten used to his abnormal schedule, but he took it anyway. When Izuku arrived at Nezu's office, he didn't even bother to knock, knowing Nezu was watching already. He opened the door to see Nezu pouring him some tea, a wide grin on the mammal's face. The grin widened even more as Izuku entered, shutting the door behind him. Hello, Midoriya, Nezu said happily. We've got some very interesting things to talk about today. We do? Izuku asked curiously as he took his seat across from him. Yes, a UA alumni called me. As Nezu said this, he leaned onto his desk, making Izuku nervous. He mentioned you proposed a project to him, and that he accepted. Izuku showed a look of confusion before it clicked in his mind. Oh, Mr. Genji! Yes, I called him the other night. Nezu accepted this and took a sip of his tea before turning serious. So, what's the project? The look in Nezu's eye said that Izuku would not leave this room until Nezu got to see his notes. Slowly, Izuku grabbed his notebook from his bag and opened it to the appropriate page before sliding it across the desk. Nezu's hands were on it immediately as he read through Izuku's notes, a pleased look on his face. Wonderful, Nezu said before looking up. Next week all of your classes will be spent with Mr. Genji working on your project. Huh? Izuku looked at him with his mouth gaping open. But internships are the week after that. Shouldn't I be preparing with Gran Torino? Oh, Gran Torino will still come in to speak with you while you work if you'd like. But I would like this project down sooner rather than later, Nezu said simply as he returned Izuku's notebook. If Shinso-kun can train with your support items before Class 1A's practical exam at the end of this semester, he'll have a greater chance at getting into the hero course. Wait, Shinso-kun is getting his chance of getting into the hero course at the end of this semester? Izuku asked excitedly. I'll have to tell Shinso that. Yes, but you can't tell him that, of course, Nezu said, cutting off Izuku's thoughts. Izuku slumped slightly in his chair. Anyway, Mr. Genji and yourself will be able to use the lab all week. I've arranged it so that all the engineering classes will be replaced with a surprise hex ed course. Izuku made a face of disgust, and Nezu laughed at him. I don't have to participate in that, do I? Izuku asked, hoping the answer would be no. Oh no. That's only for the second and third years. Students your age get their health course next semester, Nezu explained. Izuku sighed, slightly relieved but also nervous for the next semester. I've planned for a couple third years to go to each first year class to talk about internships the first day, and the rest will be filled with presentations from some of the more common agencies and companies that our students will intern at. Is this something I will have to participate in? Izuku asked. No, I'm sure you'll learn a lot more with Genji-san. Nezu leaned over and retrieved his tea. But I will warn you, I am going to be sneaking in to check on your progress. I'd expect nothing less, sir. Breath, Izuku. Breathe. Izuku muttered to himself. He had tried to hide his nerves from his mother that morning by ranting about the properties of carbon fiber. It didn't really help, Inko knowing how to read her son like a book, but it had momentarily distracted him. Now he was on his way to the lab to meet Shoyo Genji, an award-winning support engineer and a UA alumni. As Izuku opened the door to the lab, he saw a man around the same height as Aizawa-sensei unpacking a bag of tools. He had his back to him, but he could see the teal color of the man's skin and his long blue hair that he had tied back in a bun. He was wearing a white lab coat with Team Ida-10 written on the back with the agency logo. Before Izuku could make any more observations about the man, he turned around. Midoriya, is it? Genji asked enthusiastically. Why, yes, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you, Izuku said, just as excitedly. He shook the man's outstretched hand before laying his bag on one of the chairs. Looking around, he noticed that they had moved some of the lab benches together to make a larger bench for them to work on. It's good to meet you too, kid. How about we start with you telling me those amazing ideas of yours? Sound good? Genji asked as he took a seat. He pulled out an old notebook that Izuku thought must be at least 5 years old. I wouldn't say they're amazing, Izuku said shyly as he pulled out his own notebook. Don't be modest, kid. It won't do you any good when you're making proposals. Genji took a sip from his mug, which Izuku suspected had coffee from the smell. You're a UA student and have multiple teachers' attention. That gives you reason to have some confidence. Well, I guess so. Izuku opened his notebook to the drawing of Aizawa's capture weapon. He had multiple notes attached to it, and he started with the one he was most confident in. My first idea was to add fire retardant to the inner layer of carbon fire to reduce the risk of the weapon catching fire. I know Aizawa can just cancel the quirk of anyone with a fire quirk, but Shinso can't. I agree, even though Shota should be able to do that. I remember a time he didn't and I had to replace the weapon, Genji said, a small smile on his face. Hizashi and I made fun of him for a week afterwards. He was so busy erasing the quirk of someone who could liquefy organic matter that he totally missed seeing the guy come up behind him. Really? I can't imagine Aizawa making that kind of mistake, Izuku said with a small laugh. Oh, trust me, Shota wasn't always such a talented hero. It took him 6 years to master his capture weapon all by himself. I told him I could design something else for him, but he was too stubborn. Genji then pulled out his phone and gave it to Izuku, who took it. It was a picture with a young Shota Aizawa tangled up in his capture weapon with his quirk activated, glaring somewhere next to the camera. He's most likely glaring at Yamada-sensei. Anyway, we better get back on track, Genji said as Izuku handed him his phone back. Right, my second idea was to include a spare roll of the capture weapon on Shinso's utility belt. I know Eraserhead likes to use his capture weapon to restrain villains after they've been caught, but then he can't move away from them, Izuku continued. Genji continued to write in his notebook, nodding along as Izuku spoke. And since carbon fiber is so strong, it would be better to use that than regular rope. Plus, if anything does happen to his original capture weapon, all he'll have to do is unroll his other one. A good backup, I like it, Genji added. Anything else? Nothing to do with the capture weapon, really, but I do have other ideas for Shinso-kun's costume and other support items. Well, get to it, I'd love to hear them. Izuku smiled at the engineer. He reminded him of Yamada-sensei's humor and Higuri-sensei's willingness to listen to Izuku's ideas. He can see why he would be the perfect neutral friend for Yamada and Aizawa. Though I'm starting to think Yamada-sensei and Aizawa-sensei are more than friends. My friend Mei and I have designed a voice modifier. It will be able to take in sound waves and mimic them. This way Shinso will be able to trick villains who already know his quirk into talking, Izuku said proudly. Out of all of his and Mei's collaborated ideas, this one was definitely the best. And by the impressed look on Genji-san's face, Izuku thinks he agrees. That's impressive, kid. Is she the one who will be stopping by during the afternoons to join us? Genji asked. Yes, she is, Izuku said with a nod. We've also designed him a pair of boots that are a mixture of my anti-gravity shoes and Mei's electromagnetic soles. With them he'll be able to jump higher and have better footwork. Other than that, it's mostly just common support items he can keep in his utility belt. And you're a first year, right? Genji asked, looking at Izuku skeptically. Izuku couldn't help himself and smiled widely. Yes, sir, and so is Mei-chan, Izuku answered proudly. Man, kids come in even smarter now, huh? Genji said with a laugh. I can't say I was this smart when I got into UE. Sure, I was good in the maths and sciences, but other than that I just liked blowing stuff up. Thought if I got into a career where I can do that both purposefully and accidentally would be nice. Blowing stuff up? Izuku asked, surprised at the confession. That's why you went into the support field? To blow stuff up? Genji laughed as Izuku stared at him with his shocked expression. Note, don't introduce Kaken and Genji-san. In my defense, I only exploded things under my dad's supervision growing up. It was kind of a bonding thing, you know? Izuku didn't know, not from experience, anyway. But then he remembered how Bakugo and Uncle Masaru had always bonded over cooking, so maybe it wasn't so odd. I guess, Izuku said hesitantly. Anyway. Would you like to see the costume design? Yes, please, Genji said excitedly. To Izuku, he looked like a puppy who was just offered a treat. Izuku slid his notebook over with the design open. It was rather simple in Izuku's eyes, but he knew Shinso would appreciate simplicity. Mimicking Eraserhead's costume, it was a pair of black pants and a black long-sleeved shirt. There were 2 strips of dark purple on either side on the pant legs and the sleeves. The utility belt was also black, but had the same dark purple on it. Izuku had designed the purple lines to randomly travel across the belt. The boots were the same purple with black laces and soles. Izuku also added a pair of black fingerless gloves and, of course, the capture weapon and voice modifier. You're pretty talented in the art department too, huh, kid? Man, when I started it was just stick figures with word bubbles next to them, Genji said as he looked over the design. Why yeah, I really enjoy the costume design part. It's my main focus, really. Genji nodded and looked over the design one more time before standing. Well, we only have a week, so let's get started. I've got the main supplies for the capture weapon and I'm sure we can find some sort of fire retardant around here. If not, we can fix one up ourselves, Genji said as he walked over to a large case in the corner of the room. Izuku quickly went over to his locker and put on a pair of overalls before searching for a fire retardant in one of the cupboards. Once he found one he liked and that wouldn't affect any of the carbon fibers, he brought it over to Genji-san. Good choice, the man said as he took it. He then gave Izuku a pair of gloves and goggles before leading him through the process of weaving the fibers together. Genji had brought one of his own machines to help the process, and Izuku fell in love with it instantly. It was a mixture of a sewing machine and a welding gun. Once Izuku got the hang of it, and had done it long enough to be satisfied, Genji took over to let Izuku work on some of the other necessities. Looking over his notes, Izuku decided to start with the shoes since Mei had called dibs on the voice modifier. Walking over to one of the supply cabinets, Izuku grabbed a few electromagnetic plates to go into the soles as well as any other materials he needed to start. By the time lunch rolled around, Izuku was fairly confident in the 2 soles he had made, only shocking himself once. Genji had also made progress and had the first inner layer of carbon fiber finished and coated in fire retardant. Overall, a very successful morning. Genji placed the line of fiber down and walked over to Izuku's bench, looking at the 2 soles on the table, though they didn't look like them yet. Nice work, kid, Genji said as he picked it up carefully. You really welded this all together in one morning? Man, you work fast. Thank you, Genji-san, Izuku said with a smile. My old teacher taught me how to weld when I was in middle school. I've had lots of practice since then. I can tell. Genji looked like he was about to say something else, but the door to the lab suddenly flew open and a vibrant cockatoo and pygmy puff came bashing in. Sorry we're late, the 2 yelled as they approached the stunned support engineer and student. There was a bit of a line in the CAF-. Mei started. But we brought your favorites, President Mike finished. Izuku peered over at Genji-san to see a fond smile on the man's face as President Mike offered him one of the trays he was carrying. Looking back over to Mei, he wore a similar smile as he saw the katsudon on the tray she offered to him. We thought you 2 might be hungry working so hard on making your babies together. Bad timing. Genji-san was just taking a sip of juice when Mei said that and spat it out in surprise, resulting in President Mike and the 2 students sharing a laugh at the man's face. Don't worry, Shoyo, that's Hatsume's way of saying inventions. President Mike cleared up. Genji visibly relaxed at hearing this. Sorry Shota isn't here. I tried to convince him to come, but he was adamant that he had to have his noontime nap. I can't say I'm surprised, Genji said with a laugh. I still have my suspicions that he naps during classes too. Chapter 35. Once lunch was over, Mei joined Izuku and Genji-san on their work. Izuku was slightly embarrassed when she squealed about how excited she was to make babies with them. The poor engineer had a harsh blush before backing away in fright. His response to Izuku explaining that she meant babies as inventions was a relieved. Thank God, I don't want to catch a case. Once that was settled, they were hard at work, Izuku beginning the testing process on the soles while Mei started the voice modifier. Genji would take breaks on his work with the scarf to check up on the two of them, probably since he got a warning note from Higuri-senpai about Mei's tendency to explode her projects. By the end of the day, all of them were satisfied with the amount of work they'd accomplished. Izuku was slightly disappointed he didn't get a visit from Gran Torino or Nezu, but he didn't let it bother him. It allowed him to finish more than he planned to, and that made him happy. The next day, Izuku was excited to see Nezu already waiting for him with Genji-san in the lab. By the looks of it, Genji was explaining the baseline of the capture weapon to Nezu. Izuku hurried to put on his overalls so that he could join the conversation. Really, the metal alloy doesn't do all that much but to keep the fabric strong. To cut something like this you need a custom-made knife. Shoyuta has one and I'll be making another with Midoriya tomorrow. Genji-san continued as Nezu played with what he had so far of the scarf. What are we making the knife out of? Izuku asked excitedly. Genji jumped slightly and turned to him with a small smile. You're a stealthy one, aren't you? And you'll see tomorrow. It's a surprise. Izuku's excitement didn't waver as he got to work. After a few quick tests and some adjustments to the soles, Izuku brought out a pair of combat boots he got Higuri-senpai to buy for him. Finding out Shinso's shoe size was easier than he expected since he only had to discreetly check Shinso's running shoes before they left one of their sessions with Aizawa. The boots were plain black, but Izuku planned on using some spray paint on them after the testing stage. Izuku quickly got to work taking out the soles of the shoes, careful not to cause too much damage. Nezu stayed nearby drinking a cup of tea and waited till Izuku got the soles out to start asking questions. What do you have there? Nezu asked as he approached him. Izuku couldn't hide his smile as he got out the sketch he and Mei put together and gave it to him. This is something Mei and I designed together. I think we decided to call them mobility boots. They are a mixture of my anti-gravity shoes and Mei's electromagnetic soles. We're hoping it will help Shinso as an underground hero since he'll be doing lots of parkour. Izuku stated excitedly as he went to grab some pieces of metal from one of the trunks. And I see you're also planning on adding steel toes. Oh. And you're adding some to the heel as well? Izuku nodded as he got the 4 pieces of metal he had cut last week. That way his kicks won't need to be as strong to make a big impact on his opponents. Izuku brought the pieces over and Nezu picked one up to inspect. Izuku took the first shoe, 2 pieces of metal and some fabric over to the sewing machine. He knew his work wouldn't be the best, but if he let Mei do the sewing he would probably end up with a best friend with a piece of cloth sewn to her finger. It only took Izuku till lunch to have the shoes finished. The sewing wasn't pretty, but it was all on the inside and it did its job in keeping everything together. Now Izuku was just trying to figure out who could test them. He would test them himself, but he wanted someone who's never used similar shoes tell him how they felt. Easy there, kid. If you keep thinking so hard you might pop a brain cell or two. Genji laughed. Izuku smiled up at him and relaxed his expression as the engineer sat next to him. What's up? I need someone who wears a size 29 shoe, size 11 US, to test the boots out. But I don't really know anyone. Izuku said uncertainty. He knew there had to be someone else in the school who wore size 29 shoes, but he didn't want to ask random people for their shoe size. I think Shota or Hisashi wear a size 29. I can't remember which one though. Let's go ask. Izuku stared at him in shock as he got up and left the room. A few seconds later his head popped back in and he looked at Izuku accusingly. You're supposed to come too, you know. Izuku quickly spluttered out an apology and grabbed the shoes, following Genji down the hall. He quickly realized they were heading to the staff room and hoped both the teachers were there. If not, hopefully at least one of the teachers wore the right size. Genji opened the door and let Izuku in. Looking around he saw that there were only 3 teachers on break and 2 of them were the ones they were looking for. Yo, what size shoes do you guys wear? Genji's abrupt question got the attention of the 3 teachers in the room fairly quickly and Kiyama-sensei did not look happy. Excuse you. I am not answering that question. How dare you ask a woman such a thing? Geesh man. Yamada-sensei laughed. No wonder you aren't married yet. I wasn't asking you. I was asking the hobo and cockatoo sitting next to you. Genji defended, pointing at Aizawa and Yamada in turn. Izuku fought to keep his giggle in, but quickly broke as Kayama-sensei made eye contact with him and doubled over. Who are you calling a cockatoo? 29, why? Izuku quickly looked over at Aizawa and approached happily. Aizawa-sensei? Can you please help me test these boots? Izuku asked sweetly. And he always said all he had to do was send her a smile with his big green eyes and she would never say no. The effect seemed to work on Aizawa too since he nodded and stood. Yamada, Genji and Kayama-sensei all opened their mouths in shock as he did so. Seriously, Shota! Genji exclaimed. You never helped me test my prototypes unless I bought you coffee for a month. And all this kid has to do is send you a smile and you say yes? Auntie calls it the Midori effect. Izuku chipped in. She says Mom and I both have it. Izuku sent them all his cutest smile and heard a small ah come from Kayama-sensei who held her hands over her heart. Yamada seemed to consider this before sliding in next to Izuku. And say, I don't know. Yamada said as he put his arm around Izuku and led him out of the room. Someone offered to pay you for your services, Dash. Lowering his glasses and leaning in, he whispered. How much would we be talking? I'm not doing anything illegal, Izuku said immediately. Yamada-sensei bursted out laughing and continued to lead Izuku outside. Aizawa, Kayama and Genji followed them as Izuku continued to make Yamada laugh. When they finally got to an open area, Izuku turned and handed Aizawa the shoes. What exactly are these supposed to do? Aizawa asked as he tied the laces. Help with the wearer's footwork and mobility overall. If you don't mind going for a small jog around the fountain, it'll help the boots store some energy before the real tests. Aizawa nodded and went on his light jog, his friends all yelling encouraging words that Izuku knew were meant to annoy him. Once Izuku thought enough energy should be stored, Izuku motioned for Aizawa to return. Looking over to Yamada-sensei, he leaned over. Yamada-sensei, go try to knock him over. The blonde's eyes lit up and he immediately dashed towards Aizawa, who seemed surprised before trying to dodge the incoming shove. Yamada still got a good hand on him, and Aizawa stumbled a bit before finding his footing again. Yamada continued to try to land another shove, Aizawa dodging him with ease. Izuku smiled. He could tell the majority of Aizawa's victories came from experience, but there were some points where the boots definitely helped him stay upright. Once he was satisfied, he whistled and the two heroes came back over. Aizawa with a not-so-pleased look. No warning, kid? Aizawa asked with an arched brow. Izuku smiled in return. I needed Yamada-sensei to get at least one good shove to see how the boots would help you get your footing. A deep blush came to his cheeks afterwards. Sorry? Aizawa scoffed, but the other three laughed. What's next? I need you to jump up and down, Izuku said, taking a few steps back. Yamada, Kayama and Genji all quickly followed and a small concerned look came over Aizawa's face before vanishing. The heroes started jumping in place. As the Sauls recognized that he was jumping, they began to release energy, and soon Aizawa was jumping higher and higher. Clearly alarmed, Aizawa stopped and looked over at Izuku, who smiled happily. Perfect, Izuku said excitedly. You can take them off now. That should do. Aizawa complied and the group separated. Izuku was happily surprised to see Mei already in the lab working on the voice modifier when they got there. 2 bentos left on the bench for him and Genji. What were you two doing? Mei asked as she tightened something with a wrench. We just finished testing the boots. They work pretty well. I think Shinso is gonna like them. Izuku opened his bento and started eating the cold soba Mei had gotten for him. Genji joined him and the two listened to Mei as she babbled about how excited she was for the internships next week. Izuku got to quick work spray painting the boots after he was finished eating. He used a booth in the corner of the room that would suck up the chemicals from the can. He still wore a mask to protect himself as he used careful swipes on the boots. He had removed the laces and taped up the bottom of the shoes to keep them black. Luckily, the type of leather on the boots took the paint better than he thought, and he only needed 2 layers. So what are you gonna work on next, Izuku? Mei asked as he finally placed the boots somewhere safe to dry. I'm gonna start working on the actual costume, Izuku said as he went to grab the fabric Higuri-senpai left for him. It's gonna be handmade? Mei exclaimed. Well, yeah. I want it to be tough, you know? And you can't exactly go to the store to find black apparel with purple accents at just any store. Izuku responded as he held up the black shirt and pants Higuri-senpai had already prepared for him. Plus, Higuri-senpai did the hard work and made the shirt and pants with the carbon alloy like I asked him to. All I need to do is the purple accents. That's gonna be tough. Think you can handle it? Genji asked from his workstation. Izuku nodded determinedly. I have 3 days to finish the costume, belt, and help Genji-san with the knife. That should be plenty of time for trial and error, right? There was a lot of trial and error. Luckily, Izuku wasn't alone. Higuri-senpai ended up coming to help Izuku with the design, and Genji-san did most of the difficult work on the knife for him. Mei helped Izuku with the flash bombs and grappling hook while he had a quick lesson with Gran Torino. Now it was Monday morning. The costume was packed away neatly in a silver case Izuku was carrying with the letters HS on it. He was supposed to meet Shinso and Aizawa sensei at the train station where all of Class 1A was. Nezu had hinted that Detective Tsukachi might pick him up there or that Aizawa would escort him to the police station, but he wasn't sure. When he spotted Class 1A, Aizawa was giving them a speech on how to behave and how they were to represent Yui. Shinso was standing a few feet behind Aizawa, obviously uncomfortable with all the curious looks 1A was sending his way. Once Aizawa sent the students on their way, Izuku approached. Shinso! Shinso turned at hearing his name and gave Izuku an odd look as he approached. What are you doing here? Shinso asked. You forgot your hero costume, silly! Izuku exclaimed, holding the case out for Shinso to take. Shinso stared at the case, then at Izuku, then back at the case. Confusion and awe written all over his usually emotionless face. Izuku could see Aizawa hiding a small smile in his capture weapon in the corner of his eye and smiled even brighter. My hero costume? Shinso asked as he took the case from him. Why yeah, I thought, since you'll be going into the hero course soon, well, I thought it might help to have a costume. Mei-chan and I worked on it with the help of Ye alumni. Izuku explained, staring at the floor between them. If you don't like it, or if there's anything you want to add, let us know. We'll be happy to help. Thank you. Tsukachi will be here in 5 minutes. Aizawa interrupted. In the meantime, we'll be heading out. Don't get into any trouble, got it? Izuku nodded and watched the two leave before finding a seat on a bench nearby. Chapter 36. It didn't take long until Izuku saw the familiar detective round the corner. He immediately stood and made his way over to the detective, who welcomed him with a kind smile. Hello there, Midoriya. Tsukachi greeted him. I'm sure Nezu already told you, but this is my first time having an intern, so please forgive me if I'm not a good teacher. I'm sure you'll do great, sir, Izuku said excitedly. Tsukachi smiled even brighter, his hands out in front of him waving shyly. None of this sir stuff. You're making me feel old. Tsukachi will work just fine, he said before leading Izuku to his car. I must warn you, I take on a lot of cases that I can't share with you. So this week may not be as exciting as you thought it would be. Nezu already warned me, aside Tsukachi-san. I'm still excited. I've been told you deal with a lot of cold cases. Do you think it would be possible for us to look at one if I do well throughout the first half of the week? Izuku knew the odds were low, but Nezu said it wouldn't hurt to ask. Especially if he used the Midori effect. When Tsukachi looked over and made eye contact with Izuku, he knew he made the right decision. Tsukachi seemed hesitant and looked forward as he thought things through. You don't have to answer me now, Tsukachi-san, Izuku said as they continued their walk into the parking lot. I know it's a big decision and that you might feel hesitant for my safety. That's why I thought a cold case would be safer, you know? Yes, looking at a cold case would be safer. I'm just not sure I have one that would be at your level, Tsukachi said as he unlocked his car. It was plain and black and everything Izuku expected from the man. But I'm sure Nezu chose you for your fast mind, so maybe we can give it a shot. Izuku smiled brightly at the detective before jumping into the car, even more excited for the week. Pulling out his phone, he saw Mei had texted him that she safely arrived at her internship. He quickly sent a response saying he was with the detective before turning off his phone. His mother always told him that when you travel with someone, you give them a chance at a conversation before you go on your phone. So, what has Gran taught you so far? Tsukachi asked as he drove them in the direction of the precinct. We started with what to do when you arrive at a scene. Recovery Girl taught me some first aid and Gran gave me a couple lessons on how to help someone who is having a panic attack, Izuku said proudly. Gran has also taught me the basic steps when searching a crime scene and proper procedures. He's also given me a few fake cases to solve as homework. Izuku turned to the detective, an excited smile on his face. Those are my favorite. Reading through what seems like random information and then pinpointing what's important and what can be looked at later. Tsukachi chuckled, a smile on his face as he listened to Izuku. Izuku began to worry that he was speaking too much, but the look in Tsukachi's eye told him he was interested, so he continued on, talking about the last homework case Gran had given to him. Here we are, kid. Let's head in. Izuku quickly grabbed his yellow backpack and entered the back door behind Tsukachi. Many of the officers they passed were busy working on paperwork or interviewing people, but the odd person would send Izuku an encouraging smile before continuing their work. Tsukachi led Izuku to the back corner of the precinct where there was a line of rooms Izuku expected were offices. Opening the first door, Tsukachi entered first, Izuku following. Hello Asahi-san, I hope we're not intruding. I thought I would introduce Midoriya to you first. Izuku looked past Tsukachi to see he was talking to a pretty woman who was seated at a messy desk. The woman had round glasses and messy brown hair with pens and pencils sticking out of it. She sent Izuku a kind smile and got up, immediately welcoming him. Hey kiddo! You can call me Asahi-san. I'm the secretary for all the detectives in the precinct. She extended her hand and Izuku took it, shaking it lightly with a small smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Asahi-san. I'm Midoriya Izuku. I'm excited to be working with you, Izuku said shyly, but proud he didn't stutter. Asahi cooed at him, which briefly reminded him of Kayama-sensei before Tsukachi spoke again. If you like coffee or want a cup of tea, I recommend you come here. Asahi has a station in the corner of her office and it's 10 times better than the coffee in the break room. Tsukachi pointed to a table in the corner of the room and Izuku nodded. I might have a couple meetings throughout the week that you might not be allowed into, so Asahi has offered up her space. I'll either give you something or Asahi will find something for you to do. Izuku nodded, waving goodbye to the woman as they left her office and continued down the hall. As they walked down the hall, Izuku read the different plaques with the names of the detectives and higher-ups in the precinct. Finally they came to Tsukachi's office, right next to the chief's at the end of the hallway. It's pretty plain, but it gets the job done, Tsukachi said as he opened the door. Just like his car, it was exactly what Izuku expected of the man. The office was a good size with a big desk in the center. One wall was covered up with a bookcase and 4 file cabinets. Izuku noticed on the opposite wall there was a smaller desk, probably put there just for him. I see you found your desk, Tsukachi said as he walked over to his own. Go ahead and drop off your bag. I'll take you on the rest of the tour. Izuku did as told and followed Tsukachi through the whole precinct. They went to the break room, the temporary cells, the entrance and even the evidence locker, though Izuku couldn't go in. One more thing, Tsukachi said as he led Izuku to one of the officers' cubicles. The officer inside had an obvious cat quirk and was typing away on his computer before turning to greet them. This is Sansa, my right-hand man. Sansa, this is Midoriya Izuku. Hello Sansa-san, it's nice to meet you, Izuku said kindly as he shook Sansa's paw. Nice to see you awake, kid, Sansa said in return, making Izuku reel back in surprise and confusion. Sansa and Tsukachi chuckled before he explained. I was one of the responding officers at the USJ. I also visited with Tsukachi before you woke up. Oh, right, Izuku said with a bright blush on his face. Quit scaring the kid, Sansa. I just got him, Tsukachi said as he led Izuku back in the direction of his office. Izuku waved to the officer bashfully as he followed the detective, subtly wondering how many people had seen him asleep in the hospital that he didn't know about. Once they returned to the office, Izuku immediately sat at his desk like Tsukachi motioned for him to do and turned to Tsukachi, waiting for orders. Tsukachi retrieved a pile of papers from one of the cabinets and laid them out in front of him. Izuku looked at them before realizing they were witness statements regarding an incident that happened yesterday. A 6-year-old boy's quirk came in while he and his mother were out grocery shopping. It was a strong emitter-type quirk that allowed the user to see the worst fears of anyone within an unknown range. Not only could he see them, but the person the quirk was being used on would live through them. There were so many people in the store, and since the boy couldn't control the quirk, he ended up seeing the worst fears of more than 20 people before his mother was able to help him. Many of the victims of the incident had panic attacks or went into a state of shock afterwards. And the poor boy. "I think by the look on your face you know what these are about," Tsukachi stated as he went to his own desk. "Nezu told me about your analysis, so I thought this would be a good start for you. What I need you to do is read through the witness statements, file them in a folder with the date of the incident, and under the name Sakai 052. I would also appreciate it if you could come up with your own opinion on what could help the kid control his quirk." Izuku beamed at the last sentence. He had heard some reporters making the impression that the quirk was villainous, just like Shinso's, and it angered him. If he could help the kid control it, and get him the correct mental help before things got too hard for him, then it would be a definite win. Izuku quickly got to work reading through the witness statements. Some of them were from the victims themselves, describing what it was like living their worst nightmares before reappearing in the store. Others were from people who saw the incident occur as the people suddenly blanked and then woke up screaming and crying out. But what got Izuku's attention was the first victim's statement. "Officer, on video, it seems you were the first to be affected by the quirk. What do you remember from it?" Anonymous 01: "Well, I was actually standing near the kid. I remember seeing him in the corner of my eye and then a small flash before I could look to see what it was. I was no longer in the store." Officer: "And where did you end up?" Anonymous 01: "I was at a villain attack. One with Almight and some villain." Officer: "What happened at the attack you saw? Were you or someone you loved in danger?" Anonymous 01: "No, I wasn't in danger. Almight was." Officer: "Almight was in danger?" Anonymous 01: "Yeah, the villain was beating him. I woke up right before he was defeated. That's when I saw another flash and looked over. The kid's eyes were a bluish white and he was crying." Officer: "Were you upset by what you saw?" Anonymous 01: "Of course I was upset, it was an awful scene." Officer: "How long were you under the control of the quirk?" Anonymous 01: "Well, it felt like it was a couple minutes to me, but after seeing the quirk being used on other people it couldn't have been more than a couple seconds." Officer: "Thank you for your time, we will call you if we have any more questions." Izuku looked up to Tsukachi and saw he was reading through some paperwork himself. He briefly reread the statement before walking over to Tsukachi with it. "Tsukachi-san?" Tsukachi looked up, a questioning look on his face. "I have some concerns regarding this witness statement." Izuku handed it over and watched as Tsukachi read through it, a confused look on his face. "Why? What's wrong with it?" Tsukachi asked as he looked up at Izuku. "Well, in all of the other victims' statements, they state they went through their own worst nightmare, but this witness didn't. Not once did they mention that they were scared for their life or that they were terrified. They admitted they were upset, but not." Izuku stopped, thinking about it again. "I just think that we might have the kid's quirk wrong." Tsukachi hummed as he reread the statement before nodding. "I think you might be right. I'm gonna call up this witness and ask to make sure. In the meantime, I want you to make a phone call." "And me?" Izuku yelled while pointing to himself. "Yes, you. I want you to call the kid's mother and ask whatever questions you might have for her or the kid and to tell them his first quirk counseling appointment will be tomorrow, here at the precinct," Tsukachi said as he started writing something down. "Here's her number. I'm guessing you know what to ask since you're the one who's made this breakthrough. Just follow your instincts, so far you seem to know how to do that." Izuku took the small piece of paper and nodded, already planning his questions in his head. Tsukachi told him to ask Sansa if he could use his phone, so he left the room. He went to Sansa's cubicle and saw the feline officer was eating a tuna sandwich, which made Izuku smile. "Officer Sansa? Tsukachi-san told me to ask you if I could use your phone?" Izuku asked kindly. "Sure thing, kitten," Sansa said as he stood up and motioned for Izuku to take his spot. Izuku did, a light blush on his face from being called a kitten. "Do you think I could borrow a pad of paper and a pen too?" Izuku asked as he looked up at Sansa, who nodded and retrieved them from a drawer. Izuku took a deep breath before dialing the number Tsukachi had given him and listened to it ring 3 times before someone picked up. "Hello? Hello, is this Miss Sakai-san?" "Yes, it is. May I ask who's calling?" "Hello, Sakai-san. I am Izuku Midoriya. I'm currently going through an internship with the Mistreated Police Department. I have been asked by my supervisor to ask you a few questions regarding yesterday's incident. Is that all right?" "Oh, yes, that's all right. First, how is Shoyo-kun doing? I know yesterday must have been very hard on him." "Yes, he didn't get much sleep last night. My husband and I have been trying to distract him, but not even his All Might action figure seems to make him smile anymore." "Is All Might his favorite hero?" "Yes, he always has been. Shoyo has always admired the hero for his strength. I must say, I am the same. Prior to the incident, did Shoyo seem upset about anything? Specifically anything to do with heroes or villains?" "Well, actually there was." "I see, can you tell me what that was?" "Well, Shoyo-kun saw a talk show host mention that All Might was slowing down. He didn't like that very much and got upset. I had told him that All Might was human and that he was bound to retire, and that seemed to upset him even more." Bingo. It's never a pleasant thing to learn, that your hero may not be a hero forever. No, it isn't. After that I thought going to the store would distract him, give him something else to think about. But there was no way you could have known, Sakai-san. This isn't the first time a child's quirk came in strong, and it won't be the last. I think Shoyo-kun will learn to have a great grasp on his quirk with the proper counseling. He will be able to do great things in the future. Do you mean that? Mean what? That Shoyo could do great things. Do you mean it? Of course, from what I can tell, Shoyo has a great heart. I read through the statements. I know he was very apologetic and even went to say sorry to many of the victims even though he was upset himself. That was very heroic of him, especially since he is so young. I have no doubt that no matter what he does in the future, it will be great. Izuku could hear the sobs break out on the other end of the line, and couldn't help but to have a small smile. He knows how hopeless this woman must have been feeling. His mother felt the same way when he was diagnosed quirkless. Like you couldn't protect your child from a future everyone else was writing for them. If these words could help her stay strong for Shoyo-kun, then he would say them 10 times again. If it's alright, and if Shoyo-kun is comfortable with it, I'd love to speak to him as well. Izuku could see Sansa's eyes widen in the corner of his eye, but ignored it. Why yes, of course. I'll go get him. Is it okay if I keep it on speaker? Of course. Anything that helps make both you and Shoyo comfortable. Izuku waited for a couple minutes until he finally heard a small voice come through the phone. Hello? Hello Shoyo-kun, I'm Izuku. I'm 15 years old. How old are you? I'm 6. Wow. You're almost a big kid like me then. Your mom must be really happy to have someone brave like you with her, huh? I'm not brave. Are you sure, Shoyo-kun? 'Cause I heard that you're very brave. The police officers and heroes told me so. Really? Yep. They said you were very brave and kind yesterday. I must say, from what I heard, you sound like a mini All Might. Why you think I'm like All Might? I do, and I have met All Might. He's a teacher at my school. Why you go to UA? I do, I'm in the support department. That means I make things to help heroes like All Might when they fight villains or help save people. That's so cool. Can I ask you a question, Shoyo-kun? Sure. How would you like for me to be there at your first quirk counseling session? I know a lot about quirks and I think that people might be wrong about yours. Did you watch the first year UE Sports Festival this year? Why yeah. Do you remember the boy with the purple hair? The one with the brainwashing quirk? Yeah. He can make people do anything he says with his quirk. I think yours is similar. I think you might be able to make people see their happiest lives or live through things they thought were impossible. But they said I gave people nightmares. I saw them. Shoyo-kun, the first nightmare you saw. That was your own, wasn't it? This was risky, Izuku knew it, but his gut was saying it was the right thing. Why yes. Did you know someone else saw it with you? What? There was a man, he watched it with you. He was the closest person to you. Izuku waited, letting the information sink in. You are a very kind young man, Shoyo-kun. I may be wrong about your quirk, but I may be right too. Either way, that will never change who you are. What happened yesterday has happened hundreds of times before with other little boys and girls whose quirk came in out of control. That's why we have quirk counselors. And if it's alright with you, I would love to help you learn more about yours. Oh, okay. Wonderful, an amazing counselor will be here at the precinct tomorrow around 8 a.m. Who knows, maybe there will be a little surprise waiting for you. A surprise? What surprise? That's a secret, but don't worry. You'll get to see it tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day, Shoyo-kun. Make sure to get lots of rest for tomorrow. Okay, Izuku-senpai. Bye-bye. Izuku couldn't help but be proud. Chapter 37. Tsukachi confirmed with the witness that it wasn't their own nightmare they saw, and with Shoyo-kun's admittance it helped Izuku's theory. Shoyo's quirk forced other people to live through whatever events he was thinking about. Izuku supposed that Shoyo-kun was thinking about his own worst nightmare when his quirk activated, making the other man live through it himself with him. After that, Shoyo-kun couldn't stop thinking about bad things or nightmares themselves, which activated his quirk on more people, which made them go through their own. Tsukachi agreed that Izuku's theory was highly possible and liked the idea of Izuku sitting in on the counselor's meeting. For the rest of the day, Izuku helped Tsukachi with paperwork. Whenever he thought of something regarding Shoyo-kun's quirk, he would write it down, before continuing whatever he was doing. Izuku was finally sent home at 5 o'clock with an official understanding as to why all pro-heroes hate paperwork. Once he entered the apartment, he smelt the amazing scent of his mother's cooking and walked over to the kitchen table, gracefully sliding into his seat and giving his mother a warm smile. Inko returned it as she set his plate in front of him, and they dug in. They talked about Izuku's day first, Izuku sharing what happened with his phone conversation and how he plans on helping the boy with his quirk. Once he was done, he listened to his mother talk about a patient she had that reminded her of their neighbor. Once they were finished, Izuku went about his normal chores before going to his room. There was one thing he had to do before going to bed. Ring ring. Young Midoriya. How can I help you? Hello Almight, sorry if I'm interrupting something. No worries, my boy. I was just watching some old American movie. What can I do for you? Well, I was actually wondering if you could pop by the precinct tomorrow? Oh? Yeah, you see, I was helping Tsukachi-san on a case. There's this little boy whose quirk came in. It's an emitter-type quirk and it forced him to live through his worst nightmare. It ended up activating on other people too, and he saw their nightmares as well. It's safe to say the boy is terrified of his quirk. Oh my. Anyway, I have a theory that there is more to his quirk, so I'm sitting in on his counseling session tomorrow, but that's not why I'm asking you to come. You see, his nightmare was actually about you. About me? Yes, you're his favorite hero, and he saw on a talk show that there were rumors of you retiring. I know that those rumors are somewhat true, but I really want to cheer Shoyo-kun up a little. Give him something good to distract him a little, you know? I would be happy to join you. When should I be there? Well, I'll be at the precinct around 7:30. Wonderful! I'll meet you there. When Izuku looked down at his phone, he realized Almight had ended the call. A small smile came to Izuku's face as he returned to the living room to spend the rest of the evening with his mom. Almight, or Yagi, arrived at the precinct right on time to walk in with Izuku. The secretaries greeted them both as they made their way to Tsukachi's office. Izuku hesitated at Asahi's door and told Yagi to go on without him. Knocking on the door 3 times, Izuku heard a small come in before he opened the door. Hey there, kiddo! What can I do for ya? Asahi asked kindly as she gathered some papers on her desk. Would you happen to have any hot chocolate here? There's a kid coming to the precinct and I thought it might be a nice treat. Izuku asked shyly, his hand rubbing against the back of his head as he looked around the office. You are just the cutest thing, you know that? Asahi said as she made her way to her tea collection. You're in luck, I have some here. Is it the Sakai kid? I can bring it over before his counseling session starts if you'd like. Really? That would be perfect. Thank you, Asahi-san. Don't worry about it. I know Tsukachi would like his regular coffee and the counselor's favorite tea is chai. What about you? Asahi asked as she looked up. Any requests? Oh, I'll just have some hot chocolate too, Izuku said before remembering something. Oh, and can you bring an extra cup of chai for Ms. Sakai and a cup of ginger tea for Yagi-san? Oh, Yagi's here too? Wait, how did you know ginger tea was Yagi's favorite? Asahi said with an amused look on her face. She was gathering the different cups and tea bags she needed while Izuku blushed a bright red and rushed to explain. Oh, well, you see, I have private lessons with the UA principal. And you see, he and Yagi-san are really close. And well, he kind of mentioned to me once that ginger tea was Yagi-san's favorite. I'm not really sure why that information stuck, but it did. And I thought since he had to get up so early because I asked him to that he would like some dash. Slow it down, kid. Asahi laughed as she walked over to Izuku and placed her hand on his head as she continued to giggle. Too cute, you're just too cute. Let me handle the tea and hot chocolate. You should probably head over to Tsukachi's office before he comes looking for you. Alright, thank you, Asahi-san. Izuku bowed before exiting the room and making his way to Tsukachi's office. After knocking on the door and receiving an invitation in, he opened it and placed his bag by his temporary desk. Morning, Midoriya. Tsukachi greeted him. He gestured to the woman seated across from him. This is Sano-san. She will be Sakai-kun's quirk counselor. The woman stood from her seat and extended her hand for Izuku to shake, which he immediately did. Hello, Midoriya-kun, you can call me Sano, the woman said kindly. Tsukachi said you had some thoughts about Shoyo-kun's quirk that I may need to know about. Oh, yes. I have a theory that it's not just nightmares he can make people go through, but anything he or the viewer can imagine, Izuku said shyly. At this point he was really hoping he was right, or this would be very embarrassing. Interesting, how do you think it works? Sano asked as she brought out her pen and notebook and began taking notes. So far, I know he doesn't need to be in direct contact with the person. He doesn't need to see them either. I think that there is some sort of telepathic string that connects him to people, but he probably doesn't know much about it. Izuku started as he took his seat. His father does have a telepathy quirk, so that would make sense, Sano commented. Izuku felt a rush of pride in his chest at that. His eyes also glow a bluish-white color when his quirk is in use. That's probably because he is viewing whatever the other person is seeing, Izuku said as he watched Sano's hand move quickly. He kind of reminded him of his own note-taking. Other than that, it's just my theories and not facts. Well, your theory does make sense. Like I said, his father has a telepathy quirk. But his grandma on his mother's side has an emotional-based quirk that allows her to make anyone she is in contact with feel a certain emotion, Sano said as she looked up from her notes. A mix of these quirks could create a quirk like the one you described, but we'll just have to wait and see. Today we'll be focusing on helping Shoyo feel comfortable with the idea of his quirk. If we succeed today, we can also start encouraging him to reach out to his quirk. Does that sound alright? Sounds perfect. We should probably head to the room. They should be arriving any minute, Tsukachi said as he stood and led them to the conference room they'd be using. As they walked, Izuku briefly wondered where Almight was before dismissing the thought. He probably saw Sano in Tsukachi's office and decided to wait elsewhere. They had just gotten comfortable in their seats when one of the secretaries arrived with the sock eyes following behind her. Shoyo was bouncing on the balls of his feet as he came into the room. The second he saw Izuku, his face seemed to brighten, and he rushed over to him. "Izuku-senpai! Mama and I rewatched the sports festival. You're so cool!" Shoyo exclaimed loudly. Izuku's mouth fell open at the young boy's praise, an immediate blush crawling up his face as he tried not to freak out. Thank you, Shoyo-kun. How was last night? Did you get a good night's sleep?" Izuku asked. Shoyo nodded, taking the seat next to Izuku and facing him. "I slept all night. No nightmares," Shoyo said very proudly. Izuku beamed down at the boy. "Good job, Shoyo-kun. I'm proud of you." The boy seemed to have a similar reaction to Izuku at being praised as a small blush came to the small boy's face, but the smile stayed. "I've got hot chocolate," Asahi-san announced as she entered the room. Shoyo's face immediately brightened even more as he looked to the doorway. "Izuku-senpai, is this my surprise?" "Thank you so much," Shoyo thanked excitedly as he took the hot chocolate from Asahi's hands. Asahi rounded the table, giving everyone their drinks before leaving. Izuku just smiled, letting Shoyo think this was the surprise he had planned. "Make sure you drink it very slowly, Shoyo," Sakai-san said as she watched her son stare at the drink dreamily. "You don't want to burn your tongue, do you?" "No, Mama," Shoyo responded sweetly. "Well, it's about time I introduce you to my friends, huh, Shoyo-kun?" Izuku asked as he motioned to Tsukachi and Sano. "This is Detective Tsukachi. He is the man I'm spending the week interning with." "What's in interning?" Shoyo interrupted. "Interning is when someone who is young and wants to know more about a job spends time learning from someone with the job they want to learn about," Izuku explained, pointing to himself. "I want to know more about being a detective, so I'm spending the week with Tsukachi. He's teaching me lots about what he does and what others in the police force do." "Cool," Shoyo mumbled in awe. Izuku had the idea that it wasn't the description of an internship that was cool, but the only other answer would be that Shoyo thought he was cool, and that was unlikely. "It is very cool," Izuku said before gesturing to Sano. "And this is Sano-san. She is a quirk counselor. She knows lots about quirks and how they work. Isn't that cool too?" Shoyo nodded, agreeing with Izuku that it was, in fact, cool. In the corner of Izuku's eye he saw movement near the doorways and the colors of Almight's costume. Keeping his smile on his face, Izuku leaned closer to Shoyo. "There's one more person I'd like to introduce you to, is that okay?" Shoyo nodded, looking slightly confused since there was no one else left in the room. Suddenly the door slammed open and all eyes went to the doorway. "I am here!" All Might exclaimed. Izuku turned back to see Shoyo's reaction and was not disappointed as he saw the amount of awe on the kid's face. Looking over at Tsukachi, Izuku realized All Might hadn't mentioned to him that he would be here either. "All Might," Shoyo whispered. "Hello, young Shoyo. Young Midoriya here told me about you and I couldn't help but come meet you myself," All Might said as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "Ah, really?" "Yes, really. Now tell me, young man, what do you want to be when you grow up?" All Might asked. The answer seemed rather obvious to Izuku. Every child wants to be a hero like All Might. But Shoyo seemed to hesitate before looking at Izuku and smiling proudly. "I want to be a detective." "My heart," Izuku thought as he resisted the urge to grab his chest. "That is an amazing job to have. Detectives are some of the heroes who go unnoticed, but they are just as important," All Might continued. "I wish I could stay longer, but I have an appointment myself. How about a photo before I go?" Chapter 38. What could Izuku say? He was proud of himself. He watched Shoyo jump off his chair as his mother got out her phone to take a photo of her son and his hero. A rush of warmth filled his chest when Shoyo ran to him and dragged him over for a photo too. Once everyone was settled in their seats, and All Might had left, Sano-san took over the conversation. "Now, Shoyo-kun, I know what happened the other day was very surprising and scary, but I'd like to reassure you that I'm gonna do my very best to help you understand and control your quirk, okay?" Sano said in a sweet voice. Shoyo nodded and held his mother's hand. First, have you tried using your quirk at all? Shoyo shook his head no. And are you willing to try? You can be honest, it's completely up to you. Shoyo took a moment, his brow furrowing in concentration. I can try, he said determinedly. Izuku didn't miss the look of surprise on both Ms. Sakai's and Sano-san's faces. That is very brave of you, Shoyo-kun, Sano said as she looked back at her notes. Usually kids don't feel comfortable in the first session. Izuku-senpai said that my quirk doesn't make me bad. And he said my quirk might do good. But Mama said I have to do this first to find out. And I want to find out, Shoyo exclaimed. Well, if you are comfortable, Midoriya-kun had an idea that I'm very interested in. After your quirk came in, did you start filling anything out around you? Like a string or a presence in your mind? Sometimes when I think about my quirk there's I don't know how to explain it. That's okay, quirks are very difficult to describe, Sano encouraged. Is it like a feeling? Or a thought? Izuku stepped in when he saw Shoyo's frustrated face. Try to think about your quirk now and say what comes to mind. Shoyo closed his eyes tightly and sat there for a second. It's like a string, but there's more than one. And they all are different, Shoyo stated. Izuku smiled. What makes them different? Sano asked. Well, one is a lot smaller than the other ones. And one is warmer. Oh, and that one is shorter, too. How many do you feel? If you could guess? Sano asked. There's a lot. I don't think I can count that high. That's okay, Sano said while taking a quick glance at Izuku with something akin to pride in her eyes. Sounds like Midoriya-kun might be right. He thinks that your quirk creates a small connection between yours and the people around you's mind. Isn't that cool? Shoyo-kun opened his eyes and smiled brightly at his mother. Like Papa, Shoyo stated proudly. His mother smiled proudly as she gave her son a small pat on the head. And you said you can only feel it when you think of using your quirk, right, Shoyo-kun? Izuku asked from his seat. Shoyo turned to him and nodded. Then you might have a better control of your quirk than we thought. The look of pure joy and awe on the boy's face made Izuku's heart squeeze. It's been what? 10 minutes? And I already know I'd be willing to do anything just to keep this boy smiling. Midoriya-kun is right, Sano agreed. This is already a big step in the right direction. She continued making a few more notes before looking at Detective Tsukachi and Sakai-san in turn. I believe young Shoyo will only need a minimal of 5 appointments. This may change as things go on, but just from our conversation today I can tell Shoyo will be just fine. As Sano-san, Tsukachi and Shoyo's mother began discussing the next appointment, Izuku turned to Shoyo. I'm really proud of you, Shoyo-kun, Izuku said with a kind smile. I knew they weren't lying when they said you were brave. Thank you, Izuku-senpai, Shoyo responded, giving his own toothy grin. You're really cool. And smart. I hope I can become just as smart as you when I grow up. Izuku sat in shock before quickly reining himself back in. He placed his hand on the boy's head, ruffling their hair just like his auntie does to him when she's proud. The adults finished their conversation and Izuku led the Sakais to the exit, Shoyo grasping both Izuku's and his mother's hands the whole way. Thank you so much for your help, Midoriya-kun, Sakai-san said while she helped her son zip up his jacket. No need to thank me, ma'am. I'm just glad I could help, Izuku said, a small blush on his cheeks. He leaned down to the boy's level before saying, If you ever need to find me, just tell Tsukachi-san and I'll give your mom a call, okay? The boy nodded his head before following his mom outside. Izuku-senpai! Bye! Bye! Izuku called back. He heard someone snicker behind him and a small comment of cute as he made his way back towards Tsukachi's office. When he made it, he knocked before entering so that the adults knew he was there. Yagi was sitting in the chair in front of Tsukachi's desk and the two men nodded as Izuku entered. You did really good, kid, Tsukachi said as Izuku took a seat at his temporary desk. Not only was your analysis spot on, you were able to make that kid feel so much better about his quirk. I'm really impressed. It really wasn't much," Izuku said shyly, organizing the rest of the witness statements from the case before putting them in their new folder. "I don't know, young Midoriya," Yagi said, his hand on his chin. "I don't know who the kid was more excited about getting a photo with, me or you." Izuku's blush returned more fierce than before at the thought. Tsukachi laughed at his red face, muttering something about a strawberry before handing Izuku another file to go over. Izuku spent the rest of the morning reading over the witness statements of a minor robbery before filing them. Almight stayed for a while before saying he'd return later for a meeting he would be having with Tsukachi and a few others. Asahi ended up bringing a box of pizza in for the two of them, which Izuku thanked her profusely for. She laughed at him and called him too cute before leaving them to eat. Once their lunch break was over, Tsukachi gave Izuku some more files he could go over while the detective continued his own work. It wasn't fun, but Izuku didn't mind it either. He was able to point out a few things he found odd to the detective who listened them, and even asked him to make sticky notes for him when he reviewed the case later. Izuku gladly did so, and had a few sticky notes in each file he organized. "Looks like it's time for my meeting. You can bring that case to Asahi's office, or you can just hang out," Tsukachi said as he stood with a bundle of papers. "You've gone through a lot more than I thought you would, so I don't mind you taking a break." "It's okay, I don't mind," Izuku said as he gathered the statements in his arms. He made his way to Asahi's office, knocking politely before entering. Asahi was at her desk and gestured happily at the chair across from her. "Come take a seat, kid," she said kindly. Izuku did so and placed the statements in front of him, making sure they took up as little space as possible. The two worked quietly, both occupied with their own tasks until Izuku realized he had finished reading through all of the statements. He organized them as slowly as he could before placing the file on the desk and looking around. Asahi, of course, noticed a lost look on the boy's face and giggled, closing the tab on the computer and leaning back in her chair. "So, why are you interning her, kiddo? Tsukachi said you're in the support course," Asahi asked. "Oh, I want to be both a support engineer and a quirk analyst. So, having some knowledge about investigations could help me perform better in the future," Izuku responded. "I had an internship at a support company during middle school, so I have a good idea how the support industry works. And I don't really want to have to go to university, so Nezu said that I could learn everything I needed at UA. And I'm saying too much. I'll stop now. Sorry." "You are not saying too much, kid," Asahi assured him with a kind smile. "That's really neat how you want to work two jobs like that. I don't think I could ever do it." "I'm sure you could, Asahi-san. I've only known you for a day, but I can already tell that you're a really hard worker and you get along with people easily too," Izuku said, a small blush on his cheeks. "Has anyone told you that you look like a strawberry when you blush?" Forget small. It was a full-blown, bright red blush that spread from his neck to his hair. "Oh my gosh! It's even better now!" Asahi giggled in her seat, and Izuku desperately thought for a way to get the attention off of him. So what made you want to work in the police department? If you don't mind me asking," Izuku asked, trying to tame his blush. "My uncle Daichi was a police officer here," Asahi responded fondly. "I didn't know what I wanted to do, I knew university wasn't for me, so he got me a job here. He recently retired and moved back to his hometown last year." "That's really nice of him," Izuku commented. Asahi nodded. She was about to say something else when there was a knock on the door. Tsukachi walked into the room, a tired look on his face. "That look screams coffee." Asahi commented as she made her way to the corner of the room. Izuku saw a thankful look cross Tsukachi's face before he turned to Izuku. "You did good today, kid. You can head home now so you can have dinner with your mom. Here, I'll take that file." Izuku handed the man the file before thanking both him and Asahi-san and moving to Tsukachi's office to grab his things. When he walked out of the department, Izuku caught sight of Almight in the corner of his eye. He looked over and saw him end a phone call before looking up and seeing Izuku standing there. Immediately a smile found the man's face, a similar one of Izuku's own. "Yagi-san, did the meeting go well?" Izuku asked as the man approached him. It went as expected, nothing too interesting happened though. All Might answered. On your way home? Izuku nodded. Need a lift? Oh. That's okay, sir. Izuku responded. All Might shook his head before saying. Nonsense, I don't mind. Izuku relented and followed the hero to his car, a very nice, and very expensive, maroon Bentley Continental. The whole ride, Izuku talked to All Might about various things, like school, how his internship was going, and All Might's fear of his former teacher. So he hasn't hit you with his cane? All Might said in disbelief. Even when you get a question wrong? Well, I haven't necessarily gotten one wrong, I mean. Not one that I should know, Izuku said, quickly fixing his mistake. The ones I've gotten wrong were ones he didn't expect me to know yet. I really hope I don't end up getting one wrong in the future, though. Hopefully he'll keep his cane hitting to me, All Might said as he reached over to ruffle Izuku's hair. Izuku froze at the contact, before leaning into the contact happily. We need to keep that smart brain of yours protected. Your mother truly is an amazing woman for raising you so well. It was then that All Might turned down Izuku's street. At the mention of his mother, he couldn't help but remember how well her, All Might and Mr. Shield had gotten along. His mother didn't keep much time for herself after his father left, and Natsuki and her coworkers being the only ones she spoke of. Then an idea came to Izuku's head. As All Might parked in the parking lot next to his building, Izuku turned and used his most innocent smile on the No.1 hero. Would you like to join my mother and I for dinner? Chapter 39. All Might's POV. Tashinori sat in shock as he stared at the boy in front of him. When was the last time he was invited to a family dinner? Other than by Dave, it would probably have been at least 6 years ago by night tide before their falling out. He was about to say yes when a look of realization came across the boy's face. Your small form. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Yagi-san. Midoriya rushed. Tashinori tried to stop him, but the boy continued. I should have realized, of course you want your secret to be kept. Though I know for certain my mother would never utter a word about it, I completely understand if you say no. Oh. Who am I kidding? You're the No.1 hero, of course you have better things to do than dash. Young Midoriya! Tashinori shouted, grabbing the boy's attention. The innocent look in the boy's face warmed his heart even more as he said, I would love to have dinner with you and your mother, but perhaps you should ask her first? Right, the boy said brightly as a smile broke out on his face. He quickly fumbled with his phone before messaging his mother. There was an immediate ping that sounded and the boy looked up brightly at him. She said yes. Apparently she made some extra for lunches anyways. Izuku couldn't help but be excited as he led All Might to his apartment. He had told his mother that All Might was in his civilian form, to which she responded with a bunch of question marks. At least he warned her he looked different, right? It didn't matter now, though, as he unlocked the door and ushered the hero in. A small gasp escaped his mother as she saw what Izuku had meant, and she quickly apologized. I'm so sorry, All Might. I just wasn't expecting you to look this different, she said as she took his coat and placed it on the hook. There are some guest shoes here that you can use. Would you like some tea? I would love some, and please call me Tashinori. Izuku faltered as he heard All Might ask his mother to use his first name. Well, then you can call me Inko, his mother said sweetly as the two of them went towards the kitchen. Izuku stood there in shock before following them. He didn't fail to notice the smile that came across his hero's face when he noticed Izuku's All Might themed sign on his bedroom door. You have a lovely home. All Might, no Yagi. If he's in my house I should call him Yagi, said as he went to sit at the kitchen island, Izuku sitting next to him. Thank you, Inko said as she started setting up the kettle. I made yakitori, I hope you like it. I do, I actually haven't had it in a long time, Ayagi said before turning to Izuku. You should be very proud of your son, he helped a young boy today at his internship. His mother quickly turned, a happy look on her face. It went well? Izuku nodded. Shoyo-kun already feels more comfortable about his quirk. He was even willing to experiment a little, Izuku said happily, thinking of the bright smile on the boy's face. Oh. That's wonderful, Inko said before turning and opening the oven to retrieve the already finished dinner. Why don't you set table and I'll bring over the food? Izuku did as his mother asked and set the table, refusing to allow Yagi help him and instead leading the man to his seat before finishing his work. His mother quickly joined him and they dug in, engaging in conversation with each other. They talked about the shields, Yagi's position at the school, Izuku's internship, and his mother's shift at the hospital. After dinner, Inko was quick to take the dishes, telling the boys to take a seat in the living room as she finished up and got some cookies out for dessert. As he was seated on the couch, he noticed Yagi's tie. It was perfect, not like his own bulky one. Yagi seemed to notice his staring and looked down. That's when Izuku remembered something. Why don't you ask a teacher? Yagi-san, can you teach me how to tie a tie? Izuku asked, looking up at the No.1 hero with a questioning look. He saw his mother turn to look at them, but kept his eyes on his hero. Well, I don't know how good I'll be at teaching you, but I sure will try, was Yagi's response. Yagi began untying his tie and Izuku quickly followed, untying his own. They spent the next 10 minutes going over the steps together. His mother had joined them with a plate of cookies for them to munch on. Izuku was finally able to tie a tie that didn't look like a child did it. It wasn't as professional as Yagi's, but it was still pretty good. His mother turned on a random movie, one about a girl with a telepathic quirk who was being held hostage by a group of villains. Throughout the movie she used her quirk to give a police officer updates about what was happening inside, including the quirks and possible names of the villains based on what she heard. His mom was in tears at the end when the officer got injured trying to save the girl. Izuku felt like it was kind of obvious that the two would fall in love by the end, but he didn't say anything. His mother quickly wiped her tears when she realized that they still had a guest, but to their surprise Yagi also had a tear run down his cheek. Oh, sorry. These kind of movies always get to me somehow, Yagi said as Izuku passed both of them a box of tissues. Oh no, the same here for me. I don't know what it is about chivalry, Inko said as she took the empty plate back to the kitchen. Well, thank you so much for dinner, but I'd better get home, Yagi said as he stood from the couch. Izuku and his mother both went to door with him, and to his surprise, Yagi hugged them both goodbye. Once their guest was gone, both Midoriyas decided to get ready for bed. Izuku changed before quickly checking his phone. That's when he saw it. Pro-Hero Ingenium and his brother attacked by Hero Killer, status unknown, Hero Killer still at large. Ida? To say he didn't sleep well would be an understatement. Immediately after seeing news, Izuku was messaging Uraraka and Mei. He also messaged his international friends. He didn't know why he felt the need to tell them, but once he did, their messages in return made him feel more relaxed. He eventually was able to sleep after receiving a message from Ida saying that him and his brother are both still in the hospital, but will make a recovery. He suspected his lack of sleep still showed when he saw his mother's reaction in the morning. Are you sure you're okay? You look awful, Inko repeated as she passed Izuku his backpack. Gee, thanks, Mom. Good to know I look awful, Izuku joked, trying to lift his mother's worries. She just swatted at his arm, but a small smile did come up on her face. Does my dye look good at least? Yes, you look very professional, Inko said as she adjusted his tie a little. It was so nice of Tashinori to teach you. We'll have to invite him over again as a thank you, don't you think? Definitely. Izuku smiled before leaving the apartment and saying goodbye to his mother. When he made it to the police department, he saw Detective Tsukachi was in the entrance waiting for him. Sansa was by his side and the two of them both looked ready to leave. Midoriya, I'm assuming you've seen the news about Ingenium? Tsukachi asked as he made his way to them. He nodded. Well, since a UA student was involved, I've been asked to join the case. That means you'll be coming with Sansa and I. I hope that's okay. Of course, Izuku responded immediately. Does this mean we're going to Hosu? It does, Tsukachi said as he led them to his car. I spoke to Nezu this morning, and he's fairly confident with your abilities. Tsukachi continued, looking at Izuku. As am I. On the way to Hosu, I'm gonna need you to sign a few forms about keeping everything you learn under wraps. but I think having some fresh young eyes could really help the investigation. This is a big deal, kid, Sansa said from the other side of him. The chief and Hosu even signed off on you joining. I don't know what Nezu told him, but you'll be the youngest intern at a police department to ever help in the investigation of a serial killer. Izuku's nerves were starting to build up until he felt an arm on his shoulder. Deep breaths, Midoriya, Tsukachi said as he unlocked the car. We aren't saying it's up to you to catch the hero killer. We're just saying we'd really appreciate your help along the way. Tsukachi looked at him as he opened the back door for Izuku. In no universe, are you going to go head-to-head with the hero killer? You have nothing to worry about. For the first portion of the trip, Izuku had been going over the forms and filling them out. They were pretty easy to understand. Just don't tell anyone outside of the case anything the public didn't already know. Pretty simple. He did find out that he wasn't supposed to say anything about him being on the case until the end of his internship. That part did bug him, but his mother was already made aware that Izuku was heading to Hosu with Tsukachi for the rest of the week. He wouldn't say she was happy about it, but she did say she would pack a bag of clothing for an officer to pick up for him. When they arrived in Hosu, they immediately stopped at the hospital where Ida and his older brother were being treated. Izuku couldn't help but tug on his sleeves as he waited for the chief of police to arrive. When he finally did, Tsukachi introduced him to Izuku. Chief Tsurigami, this is Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, this is the chief of police in Hosu, Tsukachi said. The chief, who obviously had a mutation quirk that gave him the appearance of a dog, shook Izuku's hand. If any of them noticed the way Izuku looked back and forth between the chief and Sansa, no one said anything. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya. I've been told great things about you, the chief said before looking back at the detective. If you'd all follow me, both Ida boys are being held in the same room. Izuku followed behind Tsukachi and the chief, Sansa next to him as the chief continued. Ingenium took the majority of the attack. The brothers were in pursuit of the hero killer when it turned on them. Stain didn't seem interested in killing him, though he did paralyze Ingenium from the waist down. The other brother has some damage in his right arm, but it can be fixed with surgery. Izuku didn't know how he felt. Too many emotions were swirling inside him. Ingenium had been one of his favorite heroes growing up, and it was awful to hear that his career would end so suddenly when he was still young. He was relieved to hear that Ida would be okay, and could continue on for both himself and his brother. But will Ida ever be the same? This is the second villain attack he's faced, and he's only in his first year. They made their way upstairs and to the hero's ward. Izuku was a little disappointed that it looked just like the regular ward, and that the only difference was that the patients were heroes. But he supposed he shouldn't have been expecting much. They finally stopped at a room and Izuku followed them in. Looking to his right, he saw Ada and Ingenium were both in their beds. Midoriya? Ida exclaimed in surprise. His brother looked between Izuku and his brother while Izuku gave Ida a sheepish look. Hey Ida! Glad to see you're both okay. You gave us all quite a scare when you weren't answering us, Izuku said as he went over to Ida's bed. Yes, I am sorry about that, Ida said as he adjusted his glasses. I didn't have my phone with me until my mother brought it. I will make sure to message sooner next time. Don't worry about it now, Ida. We're just glad you're safe, Izuku said as he patted Ida's good arm. I hope you both don't mind answering some questions for the detective about yesterday's incident, the chief said as he came further into the room. Time is of the essence, if we're going to catch the hero killer before he leaves Hosu. Chapter 40. Izuku stayed silent as Tsukachi asked them questions. Unfortunately, after the hero killer injured Ida's hand, he knocked him out, so he didn't have much information. However, his brother did. You couldn't move? Tsukachi confirmed. Ingenium nodded his head and looked at his hands, seeming to try and remember. I don't know how he activated his quirk. I just remember being cut, and then I fell to the ground. Ingenium spoke softly, but Izuku could hear the regret in his voice. We were so close, but the second he got Tenya I became sloppy. I'm sorry. Izuku wasn't paying much attention as Ingenium apologized, too hung up on Stain's quirk. Paralyzed after he was cut. Stain. Blood. That's it. What's it, kid? Tsukachi said, breaking Izuku out of his mumbling. You got something? Blood, Izuku said simply. The hero killer told an eyewitness that he was gonna stain the streets with the blood of fake heroes. Ingenium said he was paralyzed after he was cut, after he bled. His quirk needs blood to activate. Izuku looked up to see everyone was staring at him. It was Tsukachi who spoke first. Sansa, get this information to every hero on the case or in Hosu. Sansa nodded before leaving. Tsukachi turned back to Izuku with a small smile. Good catch, kid. This information will already help any heroes that go in combat against Stain from now on. Izuku felt a small warmth build in his chest at the praise he received. He simply nodded and continued playing with his sleeves as Tsukachi and the chief started their own conversation. At the sound of a whistle, Izuku looked over to see Ingenium watching him. You're a smart cookie. No wonder Tsukachi's got you around. What's he doing with a UA kid anyways? I thought General Ed, kids got internships in their second year? Oh, I'm in the support course. I'm interning with Detective Tsukachi since I want to be a quirk analyst as well as a support engineer. Izuku explained. Ingenium nodded, in understanding. So you're the kid all my friends have been talking about. Izuku faltered, a look of confusion coming across his face. Who? Oh, I went to school with a couple of your teachers. Including the support engineer you borrowed from me last week. Ingenium said matter-of-factly. A new look of understanding came across his face as he remembered Ingenium would be the same age as Aizawa, Yamada, and Kayama-sensei. Oh. Yeah, Genji-sen helped me make a new capture weapon for a friend of mine. He plans on being an underground hero like Eraserhead, so I thought he might like a similar weapon. Izuku smiled as he remembered the costume he had made for Shinso. I also designed his hero costume. He should be trying it this week. That is very kind of you, Midoriya, Ida said, his arm in its signature choppy motion. This is the third time you've made something for a friend and you are only in your first year. I am very impressed. Thank you, Ida, Izuku said with a small blush. He began to rub the back of his head as he continued. Mei-chan and I actually came up with some improvements for your own costume. If you'd like, you and Uraraka could join us in the support lab next week to discuss them? I would be honored to have your input, Midoriya. Thank you, Ida responded. Izuku saw a small smirk come onto Ida's face and couldn't help but feel relieved. Midoriya. Izuku looked over to see Sansa had returned and was with Tsukachi and the chief at the door. Tsukachi continued. We have a meeting at the police department. We better get going. Izuku nodded and turned, saying goodbye to the two brothers and wishing them a fast recovery before following the others out of the hospital. The chief drove in his own car ahead of them as they made their way to the department. Izuku looked outside the window and watched the buildings pass. Luckily, it was a short drive and they were soon there. They were immediately escorted to a meeting room where Izuku was surprised to see Todoroki and his father. Todoroki, Izuku said as he made his way to the boy. He did not miss the look of fury that came across Endeavor's face as he saw Midoriya. I wasn't expecting to see anyone else my age here. Hello, Midoriya, Todoroki responded in his usual tone. I wasn't expecting to see you either. What are you doing here? I'm interning with Detective Tsukachi, Izuku explained as he motioned towards the detective who was shaking hands with the pro-hero manual. Are you interning with your father? Unfortunately, I am, Todoroki responded. Endeavor's flames brightened after hearing his son's words. Watch your mouth, was his response. Todoroki just shrugged as a woman announced the meeting was going to start. Izuku quickly took his seat next to Tsukachi and was pleased when Todoroki sat next to him. Perfect, now that everyone is here, we have some new information regarding the hero killer's quirk, the woman said as she sat at the end of the table. She looked up and over to Tsukachi before spotting Izuku. You must be Midoriya, correct? Izuku stiffened as all eyes turned to him. He quickly nodded in confirmation and watched a small smile come across the woman's face. Would you like to explain, or would you rather I did it? She asked kindly. Izuku thought it over before remembering Higuri-sensei telling him he needed to work on his public speaking. I can't, Izuku said. All eyes stayed on him as he took a quick glance at Tsukachi, who gave him a nod. After speaking with Ingenium this morning, we learned that Stain was able to paralyze him after cutting him. I believe that him cutting someone and then bleeding is important for his quirk to work. But this isn't fact. It's just a child's guess, Endeavor said from the other side of Todoroki. A child who has gotten the attention from Nezu himself for his quirk analysis, Tsukachi said, stopping Endeavor from continuing. This is the first time someone, aside from a witness, has seen the hero killer and lived. And the fact that we were able to get any information about his quirk at all is a leap in the right direction. There is always a possibility that Midoriya is wrong, but the fact of the matter is that Ingenium couldn't move only moments after being cut. Officers and heroes around the table nodded in agreement, and Izuku felt relief flood over him. If he wasn't sure about Endeavor's feelings towards him before, he was sure now. For the rest of the meeting, Izuku listened as they discussed tonight's patrol. Apparently, Tsukachi, Sansa and Izuku were gonna be in charge of finding the next possible victim. Todoroki and his father would be some of the many heroes in the streets, searching for the hero killer directly. Are you nervous? Izuku asked as he and Todoroki left the boardroom. Not really. My father is far too loud to sneak up on the hero killer. Izuku giggled slightly at Todoroki's response, turning to take a glance at Endeavor, who was still in the room, speaking to other heroes. You have a point, Izuku said, finally containing the small giggles. Still, stay safe out there. Ida still seemed pretty shook when I spoke to him at the hospital. Is he alright? Todoroki asked. Izuku was only slightly shocked to hear some of Todoroki's concern leak through his voice. He is. The doctor said he'll be able to return to school with the rest of us next week. Todoroki nodded, and the two separated when Endeavor finally caught up to them to drag Todoroki away. Izuku continued to follow Tsukachi and Sansa until they reached another boardroom on the second floor. There are hundreds of heroes to go through, Tsukachi commented as he looked at the 6 boxes on the table. We're gonna need lots of coffee. Shouldn't we start with the heroes that were on patrol last night? Sansa offered. No, Tsukachi said, shaking his head. We don't know whether Stain knows the patrols or not. Plus, they've been randomizing them since the first kill 4 days ago. So even if he did know everyone's prior patrol schedule, he wouldn't know them now. Assuming he doesn't have an accomplice, Sansa added. I doubt it, Izuku said as he claimed a box. The man doesn't scream teamwork. Izuku opened a box and looked at the first name. But we could start with the heroes that go against Stain's ideology? You mean his idea of a true hero? Izuku nodded, turning to Tsukachi. Anyone who does the job for money or fame, or anyone who's been accused of doing something morally wrong. Those are the heroes Stain targets. Izuku continued skimming through the names. I don't know about every hero, but we can start with the ones we're familiar with. Sounds good to me, Tsukachi said, opening his own box. Sansa, can you go run the names of that box over there? That way you can catch anything we miss. Hopefully, Sansa nodded and took one of the boxes before leaving. They spent the rest of the morning, and well into the afternoon, reading through the names of heroes and sidekicks in Hosu. Izuku was trying to use his fanboy brain to the best of its abilities to remember anything he could about some of the heroes. Eventually, they had a list of 12 names. All of them have either been accused of something in high school or are known for their money lust, Sansa said as he handed the final list back to Tsukachi. What next? We'll start by finding out if any of them are on duty tonight and go from there. Tsukachi spoke as he took out his phone. Izuku continued to eat his late lunch as the detective spoke with someone on the phone. Eventually he hung up and only one of the names was highlighted. Native is the only possible target we know of on patrol, he said as he put on his coat. We'll have another hero join him, and he should make his way here dash. Tsukachi was cut off as the Nomu crashed into the room. Izuku was narrowly missed and looked up from where he was on the ground. The Nomu looked back at him and screeched. It wasn't as big as the Nomu from the USJ. It was a pale green and had giant wings on its back. But it still scared the shit out of Izuku. Before he could move, the Nomu grabbed him and flew out of the building. Midoriya! Tsukachi screamed. Izuku gasped as the Noma's claws dug into his chest before holding onto the Noma's legs, just in case it let go. Izuku struggled to look around them and saw fire all around the city. Screams were coming in all directions and Izuku had no doubt there were more Nomas causing havoc. Izuku was almost close to a reasonable heartbeat when a giant ball of fire hit the Nomu, and they both began their descent. Ah shit! Izuku yelped as he made contact with the ground, trying his best at a roll to alleviate some of the damage. He quickly got to his feet and bolted away from the Nomu, turning into an alleyway and planting himself against the wall. Kid run! Izuku turned to look at who spoke, only to see the hero killer with a katana pointed at Native. Oh my god! Put that down! Izuku yelled at Stain. Yes, Izuku. Tell the serial killer to put his sword down like he's a toddler with a knife. Go home, child. I don't kill children, Stain said calmly as he made a shooing motion with his hand. Good, Izuku said simply as he walked up and stood in front of Native. If you want something to kill, go kill the damn beast that tried to kill me! Izuku pointed at the end of the alleyway. Stain stared at him dumbly before a loud screech was heard and the Nomu appeared. What the buck? Chapter 41. Stain didn't waste any time, quickly jumping up and attacking the Nomu. Izuku also didn't waste any time either as he grabbed Native, putting him over his shoulder. He silently thanked Aizawa for making him and Shinso go through leg day, since it meant Izuku already had experience carrying a tall, skinny body. Izuku stayed by the wall as Stain danced around the Nomu, cutting its limbs as they continued to regrow. Seeing an opening, he took it and bolted from the alley. He started running in the direction he knew the department was. When he heard a blood-curdling scream come from the alley, he tried to pick up his pace, even when it made his ribs hurt even more. Stain was quick to catch up to them, and landed in front of Izuku, making him skid to a stop. Not so fast, Stain said as he wiped the blood from one of his katanas. I've already been stopped from my mission once this week. I will not let it happen again. Put down that fake and leave. No, Izuku said stubbornly. I'm not leaving him to die. I will not repeat myself again, Stain said angrily. Leave. No! You may be okay with having blood on your hands, but I'm not, Izuku shouted back. Native may have started his career for money, but he did it for a good cause. He grew up in the roughest area of Hosu. Little to no food. Taking care of his siblings. He saw his chance to do better, to get out, and he did. Stain was shaking his head at Izuku, dismissing him. He is still a fake, Stain said stubbornly. One who only cares about money. Money? Izuku said in disbelief. He only cared about his family. And look! He came back. Back to Hosu. Back to the streets he grew up in. He's now inspiring the kids of Hosu. Showing them that they could do great things too. No! Stain yelled, making Izuku take a step back. He's a fake. The only one who lives to the name of a hero is Almight. He fights to save people in need. He doesn't do it for the money. Or the fame. No, he doesn't, Izuku agreed. He saw a bright fire shoot out down the street. Endeavor. Which is why, as his student, I cannot let you kill this man. If no one else is here to save him, then I will do my best. Izuku gently let Native down, being mindful of his wounds, before getting into the battle stance Aizawa had showed him so many times, trying to ignore the sharp pain in his ribs. Stain had a look of absolute shock as he stared at Izuku before getting into his own fighting stance. Fine, but you're going to regret this. Just then, a giant blaze of fire hit Stain's back and he fell forward before rolling on the ground towards Izuku. Izuku, with his brilliant mind, gave Stain a good kick in the back of the head before turning to get Native away from the fight. Before he could get far, a hand grabbed his ankle and pulled him down. He struggled against the villain's hold before he felt cold metal against his neck. Stain lifted him, holding Izuku as a shield between him and Endeavor. Izuku looked up to see there were many others with him, including Todoroki, who was beside his father, Tsukachi, and Sansa, who had their guns pointed towards him. Stay back, Stain said threateningly. Drop the knife, Stain! Tsukachi yelled. There has been enough blood shed tonight. Let the boy go, and put your hands up. I will do no such thing. Izuku could feel Stain's heart beat through his back. It was calm. Shockingly calm. Izuku's own heart was pacing a mile a minute. His thoughts were the same as he tried to think of a way out of this. Izuku could see Endeavor was losing his patience as Tsukachi continued to try and reason with Stain. He knew Endeavor's civilian death rate, and he did not want to become another number. Taking a small breath, Izuku braced himself before gripping Stain's arm and pulling it forward, and biting down through the clothing. Hard. Stain yelped and loosened his grip enough for Izuku to jump forward before turning and sending a kick to the ribs. Stain blocked it with ease and Izuku continued to send a few more blows before leaping forward. Instead of trying to tackle Stain, like the man thought, he leapt onto Native as Endeavor sent another ball of fire at them. Izuku felt the heat on his back and bite his lip at the pain. He heard yelling as a battle ensued, but kept his head down as he shielded the hero from any more injuries. He was just thinking about the odds of him being able to move himself and Native away from the battle when he heard a sudden thump and footsteps coming his way. Turning, Izuku saw Stain on the ground and Tsukachi was footsteps away from him. Izuku tried to listen as Tsukachi spoke to him, but he felt the adrenaline leaving his body. He slowly removed himself from Native and to stand up, only to fall into Tsukachi's arms. When the paramedics arrived, he was finally able to focus enough to answer their questions. He was quickly taken to the Hosu hospital, Tsukachi riding with him. The only injuries he had were the minor burns on his back from Endeavor's fire, and the wounds around his ribs from the Noma's talons. Izuku sighed out in relief at that, knowing any more would give his mother a heart attack. Once his injuries were treated, Izuku was taken into the room he'd be staying in for the night. Izuku couldn't help the smile that came across his face when he saw the Ida brothers. "I'm in the hero ward?" Izuku asked excitedly. "Am I really in their hero ward? Oh my gosh, where's my phone? I need to tell my mom." Izuku looked over at Tsukachi who was sitting next to Ingenium's bed. The man shook his head before retrieving Izuku's phone from his pocket and handing it to him as his bed was being rolled to the station across from Ida. "You were here earlier, kid," Tsukachi pointed out, but Izuku just shook his head. "As a visitor, but I'm a patient. In the hero ward," Izuku responded as he messaged his mother the amazing news. His mother quickly responded saying it was cool that he was being treated in the hero's ward, but that she was going to give him a stern talking to about challenging serial killers. It's good to see you're alright, Midoriya-kun." Izuku looked up from his phone to see the chief had arrived, Sansa and Endeavor behind him. "Sorry to bother you, I'm sure you're tired from the day's events." "It's alright," Izuku said, putting his phone down. "One of the nurses had a really cool quirk that helped boost my energy a little. It's supposed to help me recover faster without having to rest as much." The chief smiled at him before continuing. "Unfortunately, a camera crew was overhead during the encounter with Stain," the man said as he took a seat at the foot of his bed. "We were originally going to refrain from mentioning you, to give you some privacy, but we can no longer do that. We have made a deal with the news agency, and they will refrain from posting the video footage for another hour or so. That should give you some time to let your friends and family know you're alright." "That's probably a good idea," Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head. "The last time I got hurt and didn't tell anyone, I got punched in the arm." Izuku quickly opened his phone and started thinking about how he could word the text without his friends being too worried, but enough that he wasn't downplaying it too much. "Yes, well, let's hope this is the last time you get injured during a villain fight." The chief stood from the chair and said his farewells. Endeavor, thankfully, left with him. After they left, Todoroki entered and sat between Izuku and Ida. Ida immediately went into conversation with his classmate as Izuku continued to type up something he could send to all of his friends and family. Finally he smiled down at his phone and quickly copied and pasted it into all of his group chats. "Hey everyone! Sorry if this wakes you up, but I wanted to make sure I got this out before you heard the news from anyone else. Earlier today, the detective I am interning with was asked to join the investigation of the hero killer, Stain. I went with him to Hosu, and was allowed to help where I could. Unfortunately, while I was still at the police department, a group of nomus attacked Hosu. I was, well, kidnapped by one of those nomus. I'm okay, I promise, and it took me a couple blocks away. I don't know whether it was bad luck or good luck, but I stumbled into the hero killer. Yay! A few things happened after that. He killed the nomu. I took his target, a pro hero. He yelled at me. I yelled back. It was a lot. Anyways, the heroes and police arrived and I was in the middle of things. I did a stupid thing. You'll probably see it when the video footage is released, but it gave Endeavor an opening, so I can't say I regret it. I am currently at Hosu Central Hospital, and I will be staying the night in the hero ward. My injuries weren't serious, and I'm not in any pain. The doctor said I will be released tomorrow and will be allowed to continue my internship as long as I stay in the office, thank Cammy. That is all, and sorry if I scared you. I swear I did not go searching for trouble. It just happened. Aizawa 2136. International Besties Love. You what? Mel 1910. The hero killer? As in a person who kills heroes? Sammy 8245. Izuku, my heart can't take this. Mel 1910. That's what my mom said, smiley face. Aizawa 2136. We're putting you in a bubble. Sammy 8245. We can't. He's too clumsy, he'll fall and break it, sad face. Mel 1910. I am not that bad. Aizawa 2136. Says the villain magnet. Mel 1910. LMAO. Yeah, if you had a quirk, that's what it would be called. Sammy 8245. Aizawa 2136 changed the chat name to International Bullies/3. LMFAO, Mel 1910. LOL, Sammy 8245. Mel 1910 changed the chat name to International Reality Checks XD. Bakugo/Midoriya Family Group Chat. At Inko 1263, do you remember when we talked about how Katsuki was going to attract trouble? Mitzi 2000. I do, how wrong we were. Inko 1263. Glad to hear you're okay, buddy. Stay safe and make sure you rest lots tonight. Masaru 2101. Deku, I am gonna kill you. Bakuhiro 1111. That's Katsuki 4. Izuku, you scared me. Mitzi 2000. Shut it, OLDHAG. Bakuhiro 1111. Kaken, I think you're stuck on caps lock again. XD, Aizawa 2136. Whatever, Bakuhiro 1111. LMAO Mitzi 2000. Shut up, Bakuhiro 1111. Study buddies. Good to hear you're alright. But please stop doing this. Uriken 1305. Not to worry, Uraraka. I have already reminded Midoriya of the dangers and consequences of his actions. Tenyuita 1234. Oh. That's right, you guys are at the same hospital. Uriken 1305. Aizawa 2136 added Endeavor Sucks Toes 1216 to the chat. Todoroki? Uriken 1305. Yes. Endeavor Sucks Toes 1216. Hello? Endeavor Sucks Toes 1216. Todoroki! What is that username? Tenyuita 1234. Midoriya helped me come up with it. Were you not listening? Endeavor Sucks Toes 1216. Ida, you were sitting right next to us as we came up with it. XD, Aizawa 2136. Wait. You're all together? Uriken 1305. Yes, Midoriya has been put in the same room as my brother and I. Tenyuita 1234. Lucky ya. I want the hospital sleepover. Uriken 1305. Hatsumi Industry Dream Team. Maybe we should put him on a leash. Abi 8686. Yes, and keep him tied up to the lab bench. That way he can't go on any more hero adventures. Takasan 9900. I'm not that bad. Aizawa 2136. Then why do you keep getting hurt? Hatsi 4567. It wasn't my fault this time. Aizawa 2136. Emphasis on this time. Abi 8686. Humph. Aizawa 2136. You're so cute when you're mad. Hatsi 4567. You can't even see me. Aiza 2136. I'm imagining puffed out cheeks and a small pout. Abi 8686. El Mayo, Takasan 9900. Chapter 42. Todoroki ended up staying for another 2 hours before his sister came to pick him up. Apparently Endeavor had forgotten his son was with him, and left the hospital after refusing treatment from the nurses. The next morning, Izuku left the hospital with Sansa and returned to Mizutofo. His mother was waiting at the police department with Asahi. Both women scolded him, hugged him, and scolded him more. Apparently, according to Tsukachi, they had been brainstorming what they were both gonna say to him before he arrived. Izuku wasn't sure if he believed him or not, but both women did seem very confident in what they were saying. The last 2 days of the internship went without any major events. He helped Tsukachi organize witness reports from a few more cases and was allowed to watch Tsukachi interrogate a local drug dealer. Still, his mother inspected him for injuries every evening when he returned home. To say Aizawa was pissed would be an understatement. You'd think he could watch the news without seeing his new one-problem child bite a serial killer. Unfortunately not, because when he turned on the news Thursday morning, him and Yamada both stared in shock at the screen as it read, UA. Support student helps in the capture of the hero killer, Stain. Now, it was Monday morning. The first day back from internships, and Aizawa was standing in Nezu's office, glaring at the principal. How can I help you, Aizawa? Nezu asked with a smile on his face. Why was Midoriya in Hosu? Tsukachi was added to the case of the hero killer. Nezu answered simply. My turn, how was Shinso's internship? The kid is eager to learn, but he still has a long way to go before he's caught up to the other hero students. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Why weren't the rest of the teachers notified when Midoriya was taken to the hospital? Higuri was notified, since he is his homeroom teacher. Nezu took a sip of tea before continuing. I must say, I've never seen you favor a student so much before, Shota. I don't do favorites, Nezu. The mammal merely raised his eyebrow and Aizawa rolled his eyes in response. He is still my student. He's Hizashi's student too. Do you know how loud he got when he saw the news? My apologies, perhaps a mass email would have been beneficial, Nezu said calmly. But I still believe you do favor Midoriya and Shinso. After all, you didn't complain when I switched your 2 training days a week to 1 every day. Aizawa scowled at that. He told himself that it was only to help Shinso catch up to 1A. It had nothing to do with the fact that those 2 were slightly more tolerable than the rest of his class. I don't do favorites, he stated again before leaving the office. He had the urge to scold the mammal more, but he knew it would lead to nothing. At least he will have the chance to scold Midoriya during his training session. Damn problem child. Izuku wasn't sure what to do. He was frozen in place, barely breathing as he looked into the eye of the most frightening thing he's ever seen. Should he be calling it a thing? Probably not, but it didn't look very human-like with the amount of anger it had in its eyes. Should he run? No, he wouldn't make it. Maybe it was best to let the beast kill him. Oh well, he'd lived to the age of 15, that's pretty good, right? Hetsu? I think Mito gets it, you can stop with that face now. Izuku has never been so thankful to have Abiko as a friend as he is right now. Mei finally relented and dropped her glare before pouting. I wouldn't have to make that face if he just stopped getting in trouble. Izuku's shoulders slumped, a guilty look coming across his face as he looked at his friend. I really am sorry, Mei-chan, I didn't want it to happen. Really, if I could go back in time. He was cut off by the look of absolute certainty on Mei's face. You would have done it again, Izuku, Mei said surely. I know you would have, because you're so damn selfless you never would have left that hero to die. A deep crimson came across Izuku's face. She was right, he could never knowingly left someone in danger, even if it did put himself in danger. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, Mito. Abiko interrupted. She had that tired look on her face she usually wore in the morning. It isn't your fault you're a trouble magnet. Plus, you beating the hero killer was hilarious. That brought a few giggles from herself, Mei and Takahashi. Glad you guys enjoyed it, because I didn't. He was so dirty. Izuku grimaced as he remembered the taste of dirt and sweat on his tongue, which only brought more laughter from his friends. At least they were enjoying his pain and not scolding him anymore. Hopefully that would be the last of his scoldings for today. When they entered Class 1H, Izuku realized how wrong he was. He'd never seen Hyagri-sensei mad before. Even when Mei would blow something up, he usually kept his cool. But the look he had on his face told Izuku he was not happy. "Don't do it again," was the only thing that left his teacher's mouth, but it was enough. "Yes, sir." Izuku quickly got to his seat. When he sat down, he almost jumped as he realized his teacher had followed. He relaxed as his teacher placed an envelope on his desk. "These are notes from all of the teachers who don't teach you, but wanted to scold you. Well, most of them aren't really a scolding, but more of a you did your best in a bad situation kinda thing," Mr. Higuri explained as Izuku picked the thick envelope. "You did do good, Midoriya. But you have to realize that your luck is gonna run out someday, and you'll only be left with skill to save you." Izuku looked up at his teacher, water pooling in his eyes. He was right. Izuku was insanely lucky that Endeavor and Tsukachi were nearby. If he had to have fought Stain for real, he would have been killed. "That's why you have to train," Mr. Higuri continued. "If you're going to continue to be involved in cases, no matter how dangerous they are, you have to be able to defend yourself. Even policemen and detectives are trained to detain villains. You wouldn't believe the statistics of it really, but they do a lot by themselves when there isn't a hero around." "Really?" It was Takahashi who spoke behind Izuku, a surprised look on his face. "They do," Mr. Higuri said as he returned to the front of the class. He had everyone's attention, all of them curious and pondering the information he was giving them. "Heroes didn't come to be just to fight villains. There's a lot more to it than that. Yes, they do fight the villains that can't be stopped without quirks, or even just regular petty criminals. But they were mostly a symbol." "Like Almight is the symbol of peace?" someone asked. Mr. Higuri nodded. "Heroes near the dawn of quirks weren't legally heroes. They were vigilantes. It wasn't legal for quirks to be used back then." A new look came across their teacher's face as he continued. "Were you all not taught quirk history in middle school?" My class was taught the basics. Like how a baby was born with a quirk in China. And how quirk people used to be discriminated against when they were the minority," a boy Kudo said as the rest of the class nodded in agreement. Izuku felt somewhat relieved that he wasn't the only one behind. There was never enough information on the internet, at least none that he could find, about the dawn of quirks. "Well, that won't do," Mr. Higuri said. He seemed to think for a second before continuing. "The thing about history is that it tends to repeat itself. It won't be the same when it does, but it will. Just like how discrimination has been repeated time and time again all over the world." Unfortunately, the bell rang, stopping him from continuing. Izuku slumped in his seat before grabbing his bag, ready to go meet Ectoplasm for math. "There's a history course you can take in your second year about the Dawn of Heroes. If you're interested in the subject, I recommend you take it." Izuku will be taking it, he will make sure of it. He's wanted to know more about the dawn of quirks since he was diagnosed quirkless, but he could never find enough information about it to be satisfied. When he entered the meeting room, Izuku took his seat next to his teacher. He listened for the next couple minutes as Ectoplasm spoke about how worried his partner was when they saw a UA student being held hostage by a serial killer. Izuku listened intently as Ectoplasm also told him about how proud they both were when they saw him make an opening for Endeavor. "I'm sure you've heard enough about that day, but my partner really wanted me to tell you that," Ectoplasm said with a smile. "Is that a blush? Anyway, let's get on to math." The rest of the period went on slowly. There was a lot he needed to learn to get back on track after a week of being with Genji-san and another with Tsukachi. Ectoplasm, thankfully, took pity on him and didn't assign any homework for him. When Gran Torino arrived, Izuku was expecting another talk about his Stain encounter. However, the retired hero had other plans. In one swift motion, Torino smacked Izuku on top of his head with his cane. Izuku's hands shot up, holding the sore area as he stared at the hero. "That didn't hurt as much as I thought it would." "Don't be like Tashinori," Torino said before starting the day's lesson. Izuku listened intently as the hero spoke about the importance of time when it came to kidnappings, especially ones involving children. Time is always important during investigations, but when someone's life is at stake, a moment's decision could be the deciding factor. In these scenarios, experience and knowledge are important. If you don't have either of those, you need to assist the person who does whenever they need it. Yes, sir! Every single teacher Izuku saw that day spoke to him. Some of them patted him on his back for his bravery, others scolded him before telling him they were glad he was all right. He began to prepare himself for it every time a new class was starting. What Izuku was the most worried about was training with Aizawa. He was the only teacher who saw him in the hallways and didn't talk to him. Not only that, but when Aizawa did see him, he had this weird look on his face that made Izuku want to run away. Is he mad at me? I mean, most teachers have been saying they aren't mad, just worried. But Aizawa didn't seem worried, more mad. Yeah, he looked mad. Midoriya? Shinso. Izuku jumped a foot in the air before turning to see Shinso was staring at him, his gym clothes already on. Are you ready to go? Shinso asked, a confused look on his face. All right. Izuku zipped up his jacket and followed his classmate to the gym. Sorry again for not responding to your message. Aizawa had my phone all week so I could stay focused on training, Shinso said as they walked. Izuku nodded in understanding. It's all right, I just wanted to give people some warning before they got too worried about me. Did it work? Shinso asked as they entered the gym. Aizawa stood directly in front of them, staring at Izuku with a look that put Maze to shame. Nope, Izuku squeaked. Aizawa continued to stare at him, and Shinso was left to look back and forth between his friend and his mentor. Finally, Aizawa spoke. You're putting my number in your phone. Huh. Izuku yelped as Aizawa put out his hand. Izuku hesitantly put his phone in the teacher's hand before looking at Shinso, who shrugged. Once he returned Izuku's phone, he looked at Shinso. You too. What? What did I do? Shinso asked as he brought out his phone. Nothing, all of my students carry my number in case of emergencies. Aizawa answered simply as he typed in his number. If you're ever in danger, you will message me. He looked at Izuku again, his quirk on. I'm not your homeroom teacher, so I can't punish you for anything that occurred during your internship, but I will make this very clear. Izuku stood ramrod straight as he stared at his teacher, terrified of what he would say next. It is my job to prepare you to defend yourself, and if I have to speed up my teachings anymore after this because you can't stay out of trouble, you will have detention for the rest of your time at UA, understood? Yes, sir. Good. Izuku watched as Aizawa turned and walked towards a table at the side of the room. He had been so focused on his teacher he hadn't even noticed it. Now that Shinso has his own weapon, and will be training with it, it is time you have yours too. He turned looking at Izuku. So, what will it be? Chapter 43. Izuku stood frozen in place as Aizawa continued to stare at him. Finally regaining control of his body, he jumped in surprise. Huh! Me? You want me to use a weapon? But I'm only gonna be an analyst. I'm not supposed to carry a weapon. Aizawa sighed, holding the bridge of his nose as Izuku went into a whole speech about how it was illegal for civilians to carry weapons without proper documentation, and how it was even more illegal for them to use the. Shinso was just as confused as Izuku, but remained silent as he went to start his stretches. Finally, Aizawa stopped Izuku before the boy would pass out from his lack of breathing. Calm down, Aizawa spoke. The frustration in his voice was enough to silence Izuku as the teacher continued. Some people find that mastering a weapon can help them improve their fighting ability altogether. It helps better your muscle memory and makes your moving more fluid. I'm sure that you'd do great with just hand-to-hand, but for that you need someone who's mastered a single art. Haven't you mastered an art before, sensei? Izuku asked, slightly surprised. He always thought Eraserhead's fighting style was a mix of many forms of martial arts. Was he wrong? No, I didn't. Aizawa held up part of his capture weapon. After I got into the hero course, I relied a lot on my quirk and natural instincts. My teacher hated that, and now that I'm older, I understand why. Once Genji made me this capture weapon, I trained myself to use it and came up with my own fighting style that went well with how it moved. My fighting style works with or without the scarf, but it's more effective with it. That's why I can't teach it to you. But if I master a weapon and come up with my own fighting style, won't it become useless without the weapon? Izuku asked. His nose was scrunched up like a rabbit as he tried to understand his teacher's logic. Yes, Aizawa said simply. Aizawa sighed even louder than before, seeming disappointed. You get to keep the weapon, problem child. All of the weapons behind me are ones citizens can buy. Once you are fully trained and become an analyst, it's legal for you to carry a weapon with the proper license. Why doesn't he train with a gun then? Isn't that what most detectives use? Shinso asked from a couple feet away. Izuku thought the boy had been listening, but apparently not. Izuku's eyes lit up at the idea. There are so many adjustments that can be made on a gun. Mei and I could make so many different bullets together, all with different functions. Oh my gosh! And I would get to shoot a gun. Do you see that look on his face? That's why he isn't getting a gun. Aizawa spoke quickly, pointing at Izuku like he was a rabid animal. Izuku deflated, slightly disappointed that he wouldn't be shooting a gun. Also, because he won't get a true fighting style out of it. Snipe had to master both karate and judo in case he loses his weapon in battle. So what options are there? Izuku asked as he reached the table. There were quite a few options, including a bow staff, a nunchaku, a tonfa and a johio. Izuku picked up the bow staff before looking at the johio and Aizawa's scarf. He set the staff down and picked up the johio. You're sure? Aizawa asked. Izuku nodded, holding the steel end in one hand and looping the rope around his arm so it didn't drag on the floor. That one has a rope 3 meters long. Apparently you can use a rope up to 5 meters long once you get used to it. Izuku followed Aizawa to the mat Shinso was on, before setting the johio down so he can do his stretches. Today, you're both doing a couple laps and a few spars before working with your weapon. Shinso, you'll do the same exercise you did during your internship. Shinso nodded in understanding as Aizawa turned to Izuku. You will be watching videos online. Try to learn how to hold your weapon and repeat putting it on like you do with your battle stance. Izuku nodded, feeling a little more excited about training today. I'm so happy we can have another session again, Midoriya-kun, Nezu said as he stirred his tea. I missed our talks this past couple weeks. How has your training been? It's been going well, Izuku said as he put a small spoon of sugar in his own tea. I've been doing a lot of research about my johio and how I'm supposed to use it. It's kind of exciting. That's good to hear. I hope you haven't been pushing aside your studies. Finals are coming up rather quickly, aren't they? I guess they are, but I still have a few more weeks. Izuku looked up at his mentor and smiled. Shinso's come a long way. I think he's gonna do really well in the hero course. I feel the same way. I have only heard good things about him. Nezu took out a file from his drawer and pushed it towards Izuku. Now why don't we have a little bit of a test, HM? See how you've improved from the beginning of the semester? Izuku picked up the file and skimmed through the contents, a curious look on his face as he looked back up at Nezu. This is the League of Villains file? It is, Nezu confirmed. I want you to analyze it. Tell me what you think is odd, or whether you think nothing is odd about it. Izuku read through the pages a little more focused now. Halfway down the first page, Izuku stopped to pull out his notebook and tore out a few pages. He knew he wouldn't be able to carry this information around, but he always thought better when he was able to write it down. The only attacks made by the League was at the USJ and in Hosu. No, that isn't right. We have no idea how many times the League has committed crimes. They had to have made that big of a following somehow. To gain the trust of so many criminals, they would have had to prove their strength. Izuku quickly wrote on his page. The only known attacks made by the League was the USJ attack and the Nomu attack in Hosu. Izuku moved on to the information they had on the Noma. He had to read it a second time before writing his own, shortened note. The Noma had the DNA of 4 separate people, but their quirks alone couldn't explain the strength of the Noma. Another quirk involved? Or advanced quirk medicine? Izuku started to chew on his lip as he continued to the two lead villains. He didn't have much to say about Shigaraki, but his thoughts on Kurojiiri were much more detailed than before. Izuku spent a lot of time thinking about the League, and the Warp Gates quirk was so interesting. Izuku had a hidden analysis of it in his room. The little to no details about Kurojiiri's quirk bugged Izuku. There were many things that should have been written down in addition to the notes on the page. Like how recognizable he was. There was no way no one had never seen and recognized this man. There had to be a reason for that. You seem to be finished reading. Would you mind sharing your notes with me? Nezu asked. Izuku nodded, looking down at his messy scribbles. I'm mostly concerned with the wording around their attacks, and the portion about Kurojiiri. Nezu nodded, encouraging him to continue. The way they said that those two attacks were the only attacks, I don't think that's completely true. No person with common sense, even a criminal, would listen blindly to someone claiming they can kill the #1 hero. They had to have proven it. That's true, no one would listen to just some random, a man-child as you wrote, off the street. Nezu said as he took Isaac's notes. How do you think they could have proven it? Well, they couldn't just show every single person the Noma. If they had, there would have been a lot more being said about the attack and the police or heroes would have caught on. Izuku chewed on his lip before looking back at the Noma's details. But they could have made an example out of some people, and used fear to encourage people to join? Nezu seemed to like where he was going given the giddy look on his face, so he continued. The Noma had the DNA of 4 different people. There's a part here that's blacked out, but I'm guessing that they were all criminals. Your train of thought never ceases to amaze me, Midoriya-kun, Nezu said happily. That is correct, they were all criminals. I blacked out that spot myself because I wanted to see if you'd figure it out. Izuku smiled along with his mentor, happy to have been right. So if they could use people they thought would be beneficial as a Noma for their quirks to prove to criminals that they were strong, they would have had to have taken a lot of people. Izuku continued, a frown coming across his face. But there should have been a lot of missing persons reports? That's true, there should have. Unfortunately, for that to happen, someone needs to file the report. Nezu hinted. Izuku immediately realized where he was going with this and nodded. They probably used that person's disappearance to scare anyone who might tell the police. Maybe even choosing people who didn't have a family or who weren't that close with them. There's a high possibility of that, yes. Nezu looked back down at Izuku's notes. I see you also have a note here about the Nomu. Want to share your thoughts? Oh yes, well I don't see how the Nomu could have been so strong with just those 4 quirks. Sure, they are all the quirks that the Noma had, but none of them were nearly as strong as what the Noma showed. Izuku stopped, slowing down his babble so that his thoughts could catch up. I think that there were more quirks involved, or some kind of medicine that increased the quirk's performance. We tested for any drugs in the Noma's system and didn't find anything, Nezu said as he squinted down at the desk with something akin to disgust. Anyway, let's continue on. You seem to have lots of thoughts about Kurojiiri. Oh yeah, I really can't see how nobody could have recognized him. His appearance is very unique and he should stand out a lot. Someone from his childhood at least should have come forward, Izuku said quickly. You don't seem to care much about how his quirk isn't in the system. Why is that? Well, if the League is as powerful as they say, I can't put it past them to have someone capable of deleting any quirks on file. Including Shigaraki's as well. I see, Nezu said with another smile on his face. Please continue your thoughts on Kurojiiri. Well, this is really just a theory. I don't have a lot to back it up, but I think you'd still like me to mention it anyways. Izuku rambled, still unsure about his half-finished theory that could be defined as just a guess at this point. What is it? Nezu asked curiously. I think he's a Nomu. Now, Izuku has seen a lot of expressions on Nezu's face before. Happy, sad, angry, disgust. But one emotion that has never come across Nezu's face is shock. Here it is though, the slight rise in his eyebrows, the small drop of his mouth. Izuku wasn't sure if it was a good sign or not when Nezu picked up his personal cell and started typing rapidly on it. He waited patiently as Nezu seemed to have a conversation with someone via text messages. Once he was finally finished, the mammal looked back up at Izuku. Please go into full detail about why you believe Kurogiri is a Nomu, and do not leave anything out. So, Izuku did the only thing he could do and babbled on and on to his principal about his theory. What quirks that could have been used to create the one Kurogiri has. The way Kurogiri's behavior was so similar to a loyal dog that would do anything his master said, how no one recognized him, how he didn't show emotions. The two sat in Nezu's office for an entire hour bouncing ideas off of each other, and coming up with even more evidence that supported Izuku's idea. They also came up with ideas as to how Kurogiri seemed to have more intelligence than the Nomas they've seen and how it could be since he held less quirks or because the quirks were merged into one. By the time they were finished, Izuku had already missed a class and was going to be late for his next one. Izuku quickly packed his things and promised Nezu he would bring his analysis of Kurogiri to school for him tomorrow before racing off down the hall. Chapter 44. You cut your hair, Mei stated as she entered the classroom. Izuku peered over her shoulder to see Abiko's long black hair was now in a pixie cut. Yeah, finally came out to my parents a few nights ago. I've been wanting to cut my hair for ages. I was always too afraid to do it because I wasn't sure how they'd react, but they didn't seem to care. Turns out cutting my hair is a bigger deal to my mother than coming out. Abiko replied as she ran her hand through her hair. Does it look bad? I think it looks great, Izuku said enthusiastically as he went to his seat. Now you won't have to put your hair up when we work in the lab. Came out? Mei asked, seeming confused. Came out of what? The closet? Abiko replied, an equally confused look on her face. In the background, Takahashi was giggling into his palm. Why were you in the closet? Mei, I'm gay. What does that have to do with you hiding in a closet? Well, as fun as this conversation sounds, it's time for homeroom to begin. Mei took her seat as their teacher took his spot in front of the class. Just a quick poll, are there any students who plan on focusing on hero costume design when they graduate? Izuku quickly raised his hand before looking around the room. Abiko was the only other person with her hand up. She turned and smirked at Izuku when she saw his hand. Perfect, there have been a few students in Class 1A and 1B who are considering making major changes to their costumes. Power Loader continued. We would usually just take their requests, but some of them don't know what they want yet. A third year is gonna be coming by shortly. His name is Isaac Hall. You two are gonna go with him to one of the meeting rooms to help the hero students decide on the best costume design. Isaac Hall? Mei asked, her confusion back. That's an odd name. Thanks, I guess. Izuku looked to the door to see a tall boy with dark brown hair and vibrant blue eyes. I'm here to take some of your students. Power Loader gestured for Izuku and Abiko to stand, and they did so while grabbing their bags. Once they got into the hall, the boy turned to them and gave a small smile. This might be a weird question, but are you the same Izuku Midoriya that represented Japan during the island contest? A deep blush came across Izuku's face as he nodded. I thought so. I wouldn't expect you to recognize me, but I was Canada's representative. Hall stretched out his hand for Izuku to shake. Isaac Hall, it's nice to meet you. Izuku quickly took his hand, shaking it enthusiastically. Oh my gosh! It's an honor to meet you, Hall-senpai. I look forward to learning from you. Izuku quickly lowered into a bow. Hall chuckled lightly before turning to Abiko. And what's your name? Abiko, it's a pleasure to meet you, senpai. Abiko replied, lowering into a smaller bow. I'm really excited to have both of your inputs. I've looked at some of the original costume designs and well, let's just say there's lots of room for improvement. They entered the meeting room they'd be using and Izuku saw 5 mannequins with different costumes. Izuku recognized 4 of them as Todoroki's, Yayoro's, Ojiro's, and Hagakure's. Is that a block of ice? Please tell me that's not a block of ice. And that's just a pair of gloves and shoes. Oh my god, please tell that is not a woman's costume. Her whole chest would be exposed. Izuku was surprised to see Abiko so riled up. Out of all of his friends, she was usually the most cool and collected, but now she was on a full tangent as she looked at the costumes. This one is just a martial arts thingy. It doesn't even have any armor for protection. No elbow pads, no knee pads, nothing. And this one is the most hideous suit I've ever seen. What is this tie? It's ghastly. I'm glad you agree, Hall said as he took a seat at the end of the table closest to the costumes. As costume designers, we have to prioritize the customer's wants and needs, but if their wants is gonna make them look like an idiot, we have to steer them in the right direction. The first one to arrive will be Shudo Todoroki. His is the one with the block of ice and khakis. Hall continued as he opened his notebook. Izuku took the seat to his right as Abiko took the seat to his left, both of them pulling out their own notebooks. The only thing he wrote on his request slip was Midoriya says I should change my costume. Hall looked over to Izuku. You've done everyone's eyes a favor. Abiko nodded in agreement across from him. What did you have in mind exactly? I'm sure you said more than that, I know I would have. Abiko said as she glared at the costume as if its existence hurt her. Well, Todoroki is a very minimalist kind of guy. I don't know if minimalist is quite right. He doesn't care for fashion, obviously. He just needs something that's simple, but will make it known that he's a hero, Izuku said as he drew Todoroki's body outline on his page. He's the one with the red and white hair, right? Should we use those two colors for the color scheme or something totally different? Hall asked as he tapped his pencil on his chin and shut his eyes. He doesn't really, I don't think he'd like that. I think he'd want something different. Differ himself from his family a little, Izuku said, also tapping his face with his pencil. He looked good wearing the UA gym uniform. The blue with his skin tone really worked well. Maybe we could make that the base and add a small amount of red and white accents. Not too much, just a little bit, Abiko suggested. Izuku nodded as he looked down at the page. The material needs to be fireproof. He also needs a support item that will help him regulate his temperature. The support item could utilize the heat from his left and the ice from his right to regulate it. If it's connected to both sides, it could carry the temperature across. We could also add a utility belt, maybe a few bombs that can be activated by heat or cold. And there will of course be a small med kit, those are always necessary. How does this look? Hall asked as he held up his page. On it was a dark blue costume with lines of red and white accents. A utility belt was around the waist with line leading to possibly support items on the side. A silver vest that went over the shoulders and covered the majority of Todoroki's back was also added with instructions on how it was meant to regulate the body temperature. There were also silver combat boots that were meant to be durable and wouldn't slip when walking on ice. Izuku was impressed his senpai had the time to draw all of that and color it so quickly. Wow, you're quick, Abiko commented. Hall smiled warmly at them. Thank you, he said as he put down his notebook. Momo Yayorozu will be the second student to arrive. Hers is the one with the open chest. Her request says this: I would like to have a more discreet costume. Preferably one that would not show as much of my chest area. I still need access to my skin for me to be able to use my quirk creation. She then explains her quirk in detail, but I already saw how it worked during the sports festival, and I'm sure you both did as well. Hall looked up and over to Abiko. I'm sorry, but since you're the only female here, I think you should take the lead on this one. What do you think could be a less revealing piece that would still give enough access for her quirk? My first thought would be to have a zipper opening, but you never want it to break or get stuck mid-battle. What about a sports bra? You know, the kind women wear to the gym? Her stomach and back would show, but it would be a lot less of her chest exposed. She could also add a jacket with zippers up the arms. If they break, it wouldn't matter as much since she could still access her stomach. I like that idea, Izuku said as he finished drawing Yayorozu's outline, quickly adding the sports bra and jacket. Should the jacket go to her waist, or were you thinking it would be shorter? I think it's best to let her decide that. I would choose the longer personally, but she may be okay with a shorter jacket. Do you think we should change her skirt? Abiko asked as she lifted the material. Maybe add some shorts underneath. She's in the same class as that short pervert, isn't she? I've heard about him. The upper years call him the purple punt ball. There's a bet pool going on about how long it's going to take before midnight punts him out of the classroom. Hall laughed before looking over at Izuku's sketch. I was also thinking we could give her a smart watch. One with a big screen that she could read off of. Right now she has that bulky book on her belt. We could add a smaller notebook as backup, but I'm sure there's some durable material we could use to make it so it won't break easily during battle. Izuku said as he drew a sketch of the watch, added the shorts underneath her skirt, and added the original boots before showing it to them. That's much better, Abiko said with a smile. Next up, we have Mashiaro Ojiro, the karate GI. His request says I'm not exactly sure what I want, but I know I need more protection. It doesn't really clarify if he wants to change the look of his costume, Hall said disappointedly. It's fine if he wants to keep the GI? Is that what it's called? It's fine if he wants to keep it, but I'm tightening it a little and adding the elbow and knee pads. I saw him during the festival and he uses a lot martial arts, so he'll need them if he comes into contact with a villain with a durability quirk. Abiko said as she drew on her page, already assuming it's her turn to draw. Maybe he'll let us change the color a little bit, it looks a little too plain. Maybe he wants to go underground. In that case we might make it fully black, Hall added, looking at Abiko's page. We could also ask if he's interested in carrying a few support items. Anyways, the next student is Toru Hagakure. Obviously, whoever made her costume hasn't been paying attention to recent advancements in the design field, because if we sew some of her hair into a suit, she can have an invisible suit. Not only would it make her more comfortable, we can add protection into it. Izuku and Abiko quickly nodded in agreement. I wonder if there's a way to make some support items invisible to help her fight, Izuku mumbled. We'll leave that to gear specialists. I'm sure a few of my classmates would have fun trying to figure it out. Hall picked up the last sheet before continuing. The last one will be Nito Minoma. He's the only 1B student who put in a request. He said I want my costume to be able to change its size. His teacher, Vlad King, asked me to also convince him to change his suit to be more reasonable. Apparently he's been getting his jacket caught a lot during training and he has trouble moving around in it. Well, first off, there is no reason as to why he needs 2 belts. I mean, if you need a belt to hold up your pants, and one to hold stopwatches, you could just make it the same belt. Also, does he need the jacket? It's so long, and the shoulder area looks tight. Abiko stood and removed the jacket. Maybe we can give him a vest with plating that expands? And we can easily change the fabric to do the same. I'm guessing you also wish to remove the tie? Hall asked, a hint of amusement in his tone. Please. Maybe we should change his shoes as well, Izuku commented. Right now, they're just white dress shoes. Those can't be easy to run in. I agree, we'll have to ask him to choose a different style that's made for running. Hall finished writing down the notes, just as a knock sounded throughout the room. Come in. Todoroki entered the room, the same blank look on his face that he always had. Hello Todoroki, I'm Isaac Hall. This is Abiko and I believe you know Midoriya from the sports festival. Are you ready to hear what we have in mind for you? Just like Izuku thought, Todoroki didn't seem to care much about what his costume looked like. He seemed content with the blue color, and happy to see the vest would help him keep a steady body temperature. Izuku and Abiko were both happy when their names were added along with Hall's as the costume designers in the form. Once they all signed it, Hall put it into a folder to give to Power Loader, and Todoroki left to join his class. After a couple minutes of the 3 of them talking about their favorite hero costume designs, Izuku was absolutely floored to hear Hall's was Lady Violet's, blushing and rushing out thank yous and are you sure's. Another knock sounded and Yayorozu entered the room. We'll be honest with you, Yayorozu-san. We were all very happy you decided to change your costume design. We want you to feel as comfortable as possible, Hall-senpai said as Yayorozu took the seat next to Izuku. Thank you, I really appreciate your help, Yayorozu responded politely. If you want any changes to it, don't be afraid to say something, Abiko added. We weren't completely sure how much is too much or too little. Yayorozu nodded and Izuku slid the page in front of her. A small gasp made its way out of her lips and Izuku smiled. This looks amazing. I never even thought of having a digital watch to read off the chemical properties of different items, Yayarosa said as she looked over the new costume. We weren't sure how long you'd like the jacket, Izuku said as he pointed to the two options. It could be short, long, somewhere in the middle. Whatever you'd like. Yayarosa seemed to consider the options before looking down at her stomach and holding her hand halfway between her chest and her waist. Could it be somewhere around here? It sure can, Hall said as he retrieved a tape measure and passed it to Abiko. Abiko rounded the table and took the measurement, Izuku writing it down on the page. It didn't take long after that for them to finish the paperwork. Yayarosa thanked them again before leaving. The next knock came and Hall welcomed Ojiro in. Quick question, are you planning to be an underground or daylight hero? Izuku asked as Ojiro took his seat next to him. Underground, I lived in a pretty rough neighborhood growing up. Not a lot of daylight heroes came to the area, but there were lots of underground heroes. There was a retired hero who gave out free self-defense. Wait, I'm sorry, that's probably more information than you're looking for. Ojiro seemed to go beet red as he rubbed the back of his head nervously. No, it's not, Hall said with a warm smile. Part of our job is to make your hero costume represent you. By the sounds of it, and the look of your current costume, I'm guessing that retired hero is the reason you're becoming one yourself? Ojiro nodded, seeming to relax. Yeah, he is. He was a mentor to a lot of kids in our area. What did his costume look like? Abiko asked. I'm sorry if this sounds a little rude, but your costume right now doesn't scream Ojiro, it just screams Karate Kid. I think a little more personal detail could help. Yeah, I didn't know we had to submit a costume design before coming. I was so panicked and just asked for a GI. Ojiro looked over at his costume on the mannequin before looking back at Abiko. He was an underground hero, but I remember him telling us his costume was teal. What if we make the GI black, and change the belt and your boots to a teal color? Izuku asked. I think I'd like that, Ojiro replied with a smile. Abiko slid the page over after writing down the new colors. We also added some protection into your costume. Would you consider your belt being a utility belt? She asked as Ojiro looked it over. Sure, but I have no idea what I would put on it. That's why we're here. After almost 10 minutes of discussing some weapons and emergency support items Ojiro could use, they finished his new costume design and finished the paperwork. 2 more to go, you guys are doing great, Hall said as he put the folder with the rest. When Hagakure arrived, Hall was quick to tell her about their plans. To their surprise, the girls started crying on the spot. Izuku quickly stood, knowing Abiko didn't know what to do when people cried, and comforted the girl. After a couple minutes, they finished discussing her costume and finished the paperwork before sending her back to class, after she gave every single one of them a big hug and thank you. That leaves Monoma from 1B, Hall said as he pulled out the last sheet. It didn't take long for Monoma to arrive. He took the seat next to Abiko before turning to Hall. Can I ask why this is necessary? I'm missing hero training for this. I thought my request was pretty straightforward. Your teacher had some concerns with your costume, Hall replied smoothly. We brainstormed some adjustments we could make to make it easier for you to move around. Hall slid the paper over and a grimace formed on the blonde's face. I didn't ask for you to change anything, the boy replied, sliding the paper back. No, but your teacher did, Hall replied, sliding the paper back. I guess if you want to continue with the clown tie you can, but this is what we recommend. Clown tie! Monoma shouted as Abiko giggled. It's a perfectly good tie. Abiko was now full on laughing, and her laugh was making it hard for Izuku to contain his giggles. Izuku finally controlled himself before responding. The changes are very minimal. 1 belt instead of 2, a vest instead of a coat, and shoes meant for running, Izuku said, pointing to the page. And the tie is a safety hazard, you don't want a villain to grab onto that and choke you. If you want to adjust anything we can. We can make the vest longer, if those 2 tail things are really important. We could get you proper boots that look stylish, but you can run in. Just tell us what you want. That seemed to make Monoma easier to work with. He asked for the vest to be white, his pants to be black, and for the boots to look more formal. He also asked for the clocks to be quieter, since it's a giveaway for when his quirk wears off. Their suggestion was to have an earpiece connected to the clocks, which he seemed to like. Eventually, everything was settled and they finished the last of the paperwork with enough time for Izuku to go join Gran Torino for his lesson.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.